Pledge of Allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, as we normally do, we will start with public audience. You have 5 minutes to speak, and I see Joan is here. If you'd like to come up, Joan?
Okay.
Sure.
Thank you. Joan Cove, 26 Whitcomb Drive. At every meeting, the Board of Selectmen and others pledge allegiance to the flag. The pledge to the flag should not be taken lightly, with liberty and justice for all. Liberty and justice for all places the flag above all special interests. Adding additional flags on the pole with the American flag signifies the lack of respect for the flag that represents all people. This appears to be un-American. We should not desecrate the importance of the flag by adding other flags on the pole, giving other groups equal status to the American flag. Chief Bolter desecrated the flag during Black Lives Matter event in front of Town Hall, taking a knee during the ceremony. The Board of Selectmen has continued to be guided with the desecration to the Constitution and the Bill of Rights with their rules of procedure. First Selectman Wendy Massachusetts has not rescinded the undemocratic rule of public audience, ignoring the ACLU findings, and the rules should be changed to comply with the First Amendment to the Constitution. At the May 13, 2024 meeting of the Board of Selectmen, I asked the board to investigate whether Chief Bolter was truthful when giving testimony at Trumbull hearing. Have my concerns been reviewed with Chief Bolter? According to SCTV, the Trumbull hearing has had 197,000 views, the largest viewing numbers for SCTV programs. The police department recently contracted with Certa Solutions to study the workplace and scheduling within the department for $30,000. The Certa's report was a 93-page report analysis of the workload and scheduling within the police department. Recently, the Certa Solutions finalized the report after thorough interviewing many members of the police department within the charge of investigating workplace and scheduling issues. However, after the report was submitted to Chief Bolter, the findings were scrutinized by him with mass editing of the report under the guise that the final report was a draft and in need of changes page by page. The study that was initiated by the police department was to have an independent professional service review a report on their findings under their contract, workplace and scheduling study. The report included recommendations for changes in staffing support departments and recommendations on the internal staffing within the police department. The submitted report were recommendations and findings, no mandates for Chief Bolter to either implement or ignore. There appears to be no need to scrutinize the report generated by unbiased professionals to improve the quality of service within the department and the community. According to my FOI request, it appears that Chief Bolter had extensive emails to and from Jim McCabe, the investigator for Certus, asking for changes to the final report. The commission was tasked in these emails to review the Certus report as a draft and make changes, as did Chief Bolter. In all, there were about over 80 emails under the subject, workload and staffing study. Some of the emails reflect the interaction with Jim Cave on the final report, treating it as a draft to be edited before becoming final. The second version is the clean version. This is all quotes from my emails, with all the edits accepted, comment bubbles removed. Please make your comments edits on either version, and I will address them and reconcile both versions accordingly. And please let me know if you have any questions or concerns. From a management perspective, you are free to interpret what has been written and develop your allocation and deployment strategies around it. We have given you plenty of options to consider for possible implementation. Answering the comments from the small group and addressing your concern about community policing, Attached is what we could like to consider the final version of the report. I removed the draft watermark and all the sidebar comments and included a PDF version for your use, end quote. The emails also reflect an appointed work group by Chief Bolter to review the initial findings in the report for input before the report is finalized. It appears unusual that over 80 emails are required to change the findings of a
10
consultant
seconds.
report. This reflects Chief Bolter's micromanagement style, managing the police department and control over content, and has led to a toxic work environment. How many recommendations in service report will be implemented?
Thank you.
And how many will be setting aside in the past? It appears that all the time spent on rewriting
Thank you,
consultant
Joan.
report did not add any value to the finalized report. And all my comments will be posted on Simsbury Patch and Twitter at Joan Cole. Thank you for listening.
Is there anyone else here for public audience? Oh, sure.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Karen Bellino. I've lived in Simsbury for 26 years, and I'm a member of the Daughters of the American Revolution and the Simsbury Historical Society. Last week I was invited to the Simsbury's 250th Steering Committee meeting and subsequently asked to share my ideas here as well. With our country's 250th birthday coming up on July 4th, 2026, it's time for Simsbury to start planning our celebration. And I'd like to see our community do that in a big way. The timing would be ideal for Simsbury to show the rest of Connecticut, New England, and the entire nation how proud we are of our community and the red, white, and blue. Many of us have ancestors and family members who are currently serving to protect the freedoms we all enjoy. Let's show our respect, support, and patriotism for Connecticut's deep-rooted history, which has helped shape our nation. The visual there of what I'm trying to discuss. I'd like to see us join our neighbors in Bristol, Rhode Island, and Hingham, Mass., and become the first town in Connecticut to paint the center lines of our parade route on Hot Meadow Street with patriotic red, white, and blue center stripes. Bristol, Rhode Island was the first town to do that back in 1969, and Hingham started their tradition back in 2010. These are actual photos of the Hingham parade route. It just adds a whole new dimension to honoring and respecting our patriots and veterans. And I believe the news coverage of Simsbury's patriotic center lines would generate an influx of visitors and bring added business to our retail shops and restaurants. It would instill an incredibly proud feeling to drive down Hot Meadow Street on the red, white, and blue line, along the red, white, and blue lines. And not only for the locals driving through, but the shop owners along the route, visitors coming into town, and experiencing our strong sense of community, patriotism, and pride that we all share in this beautiful town. So my hope is that the Board of Selectmen will vote to explore this idea further for our 250th birthday celebration. Thank you.
Thank you.
I didn't mention my name, I'm sorry, Karen Bellino, 4 Old Meadow Plain Road.
Thanks.
Thanks,
Karen. Is there anyone else here for public audience? Sure.
Thomas Turner, 11 Barnard Drive, Simsbury, 50-year resident. Wendy and Simsbury Selectmen. I hope this evening you will support having the American and POW MIA flags fly on the Town Hall flagpole on June 14th. Other organizations could have weighed in on this, but over the years they have found that avoidance of getting into politics has served them well. But when I recently acquired Public Works informed me that the POW MIA flag was not flown last year, nor for numerous years previous. A natural veneration exists to never forget American military missing in action or made prisoners of war. And in 1998, Congress required that the POW MIA flag should fly every year on these 6 days of observance: Armed Forces Day, Memorial Day, Flag Day, Independence Day, National POW MIA Day, and Veterans Day. I would like to express my opinion and make the suggestion that since the American flag embodies the unity of our country as indivisible and representative of us all, including in times of war and national defense, that the principal flagpole in Simsbury, in front of Town Hall, should fly solely and without competition the American flag with the POW MIA flag directly beneath it, as law has required and custom dictates on those 6 holidays each year, including Flag Day, June 14, 2024. While the mourning flag for Trooper Pelletier has come down and the pride flag is going up during June, it would be appropriate that Flag Day, on this one day in June, be remembered for a principal purpose: to celebrate the birth date of the Stars and Stripes in 1777, and to express reverence with the POW MIA flag. Many Simsbury residents and veterans would appreciate the Board of Selectmen, their consideration and appreciation of such an observance on June 14th this year. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Is there anyone else here for public audience? Lori?
I am Lori Boyko from 15 Oakhurst Road. The Simsbury Code of Ethics spells out that, quote, the proper operation of government requires that public officials and public employees be independent, impartial, and responsible to the people, that governmental officials and employees strive to avoid even the appearance of impropriety, and that the public have confidence in the integrity of its government. In a relatively small town, it is not unusual that those who volunteer their time often do so for more than one position, board, or organization, and that is welcome participation and contribution. When there is an overlap between positions or organizations, however, it becomes paramount, particularly in a small town, to uphold standards that avoid, as stated, even the appearance of any conflict. A few years ago, when Eric Wellman considered joining the board of the PAC while holding a selectman position, he chose not to in order to avoid any such conflict or appearance of one. Similarly, Mike Doyle, a member of the Board of Finance and also a member of the board of the Performing Arts Center, recused himself from discussion around funding by the town for the PAC and abstained from voting on related matters. With all due respect, having Selectman Steve Antonio serve as the board liaison to Simsbury Main Street Partnership seems a little too close for comfort, as it's an organization on whose board he served for years as a business organization that exists to bolster local businesses. He only resigned from that board less than 6 months ago and was immediately appointed board liaison to the organization. It seems to me that this board would be better served having an unrelated independent selectman appointed as liaison to the Simsbury Main Street Partnership. I would also suggest that the appropriate course of action would be for Selectman Antonio to recuse himself from discussion and voting on matters pertaining to Simsbury Main Street Partnership, particularly memoranda of understanding and awards of tens of thousands of taxpayer dollars. This is not meant to disparage Selectman Antonio in any way. His volunteer service in all organizations is much appreciated. Rather, it is to create sufficient distance between his activities as to ensure that there can be no question as to any conflicts whatsoever. As for the memorandum of understanding with Simsbury Main Street itself, I have some grave concerns. I have so many points to make on this and other issues, I'm going to have to bullet point them and hope you all have extensive discussion around them rather than just rubber stamp them. I've read through these goals and would ask you to very carefully weigh whether they will actually materially benefit the town in a way that directly translates into increased tax revenues, or whether you are giving $85,000 to an organization that refuses transparency. They haven't even supplied the town with their annual report that was a requirement of the last memorandum of understanding. Nor do we have a single annual report from them as required in previous grant applications that resulted in them being awarded $50,000 a year. Many of the goals are actually already responsibilities of town personnel, such as working with the town to develop specific pieces of property and beginning discussions with possible partners, which is the role of the fully staffed planning department that isn't even listed as a partner on their strategy. In fact, most of what is listed is already the role of planning or the business librarian or other town boards. Why are we handing control to an outside entity whose chair is a commercial realtor and does most of these tasks to increase his sales and paying his organization to do it? That's taxation without representation. Next, 2 quick topics. Painting the roads red, white, and blue for Simsbury Celebrates. While impressive, as we learned from previous road paint projects, there is a national manual of uniform traffic control devices that lays out a national standard for all traffic controls, including road markings for safety. Title 23 of the Code of Federal Regulations in part states that noncompliance ultimately can result in the loss of federal aid funds as well as in significant increase for tort liability. Lastly, but most importantly,
15 seconds.
In November 2019, a bipartisan group of senators applauded signing into law the National POW MIA Flag Act, requiring the POW MIA flag be displayed whenever the American flag is flown on prominent federal properties to honor our more than 82,000 Americans who are POWs, MIA, or unaccounted for.
Thank you,
I
Lori.
think we should be flying that flag on Flag Day.
Thank you. Is there anybody else here for public audience? Anybody? Okay. We are lucky tonight to have someone here, Jess Testman, and I could make a reference to an old TV show here, but I won't. Has anybody made that reference to you?
No.
Oh, okay. I'll tell you later. Okay. Does anybody know?
Which TV show?
WKRP.
WKRP in Cincinnati.
Yeah.
Les Nessman.
I'm livening things up, but loosening
All right,
up a
thank
little
you.
bit.
That's, yes.
Les Nessman. So we have Jess.
turkey trot.
Sorry, I did this once before. Come on up. Jess is here from the Alzheimer's organization. We had met with Esther Pearl before, and she was here to create awareness, and there were some partnerships with our police department. And Esther couldn't be here tonight, but Jess is here to speak, to share with us some information. And then the board will read the proclamation that we have.
This is my first time speaking into a microphone like this. Thank you. Okay. I think I'm going to be more conversational tonight,
Good.
and I might just have this be up in the backdrop.
Great.
I'm going to make this short too, because I know you have a lot to cover. My name is Jess Tessman. I was born and raised in Winsted, Connecticut. I now live in New Hartford and come to Simsbury quite often. I love the charm that you guys have, and I just first want to thank you for all of the work that you're doing in the community. I serve on the Winchester Economic Development Commission in my town, so I just wanted to thank the Board of Selectmen for what you're doing tonight. I work with the Alzheimer's Association. My great-grandmother was diagnosed with Alzheimer's. They lived in New Hartford. There were not a lot of resources back then, and my family was unaware of the services and support that the Alzheimer's Association offers. So really what I'm here tonight is to let the Board of Selectmen know and to let the community of Simsbury know that we are a free resource for individuals who are living with Alzheimer's Alzheimer's or another form of dementia. Now, dementia is the umbrella term. Alzheimer's is one of the most common forms of dementia, and it is not just an older person's disease. I want everyone to know that everyone is impacted by this disease. I've connected with students, high school students from Farmington. They've reached out looking to get involved. We have plenty of volunteer opportunities. And as you mentioned, Wendy, we do have a new program with the Connecticut State Police. It is called Bring Me Back Home, which is just very beautiful. It is a registry where individuals can register their loved ones on the website. And it is not just for people diagnosed with Alzheimer's. It's also for people who are diagnosed with any form of dementia, any cognitive impairment, autism as well, Lewy body, everything. So really, we're looking to spread more awareness of who we are in the communities and what we do. We are a nonprofit organization. We're based in Southington, and really just wanted to let everyone know of our free 24/7 helpline, which is 800-272-3900. And then we do have a website, alz.org/CT, so you can look us up there. We have 6 Walk to End Alzheimer's events that take place throughout the entire state of Connecticut. The closest walks to Simsbury are Greater Hartford, walk at Brunchler Field, and then we also have a walk in Bristol at Rockwell Park. So I'll leave some information over on this table for anyone if you want to come and grab something, and just feel free to pass it out in the community. We do have the longest day, which June is Alzheimer's and Brain Awareness Month, which is why I'm here. So June 20th actually is the longest day this year. And the longest day is the day where we recognize our caregivers who experience the longest day every day when they're taking care of a loved one who's diagnosed. The only other service that I did not mention that we have support groups, we have free support groups, we have a respite care grant where we can financially assist caregivers. We really want to care for the caregivers. So I pretty much covered everything for you. If you have any questions, Wendy has my contact information. I did not really go over these slides because I wanted it to be more conversational with you, but that's Alzheimer's Association in a gist. And I just want to thank you.
Thank you. So you could stay there if you'd like.
Yeah.
So the board, as part of this presentation, we're going to make a motion to adopt a proclamation, but I would like to have the board read the proclamation. And we will do our normal responsive reading for those who went to Temple. I always have to throw that in too. I will start and we'll go down this line and we'll switch it over to you guys. All right. So this is a proclamation for June. It's Alzheimer's and Brain Awareness Month. Whereas there are more than 7 million people in the United States living with Alzheimer's disease, 80,000 of them here in Connecticut, with 130,000 caregivers in this state, many of them unpaid family members, with women making up 2/3 of these caregivers. And
whereas Alzheimer's is one of the greatest risk factors associated with aging, gradually worsening over time, and can lead to memory loss, cognitive impairment, disorientation, confusion, wandering, and more. And
whereas there is no known cure for Alzheimer's, but there is hope with FDA-approved treatment for those in early stages of Alzheimer's, and more in the pipeline. And
whereas the Alzheimer's Association offers education classes, support groups, one-on-one care consultations, and 24/7 helpline for those with any questions about Alzheimer's or any other form of dementia at 1-800-272-3900. And
whereas we recognize that investing in programming and services aimed toward mentally stimulating residents, keeping them engaged and active throughout their senior years, is good public policy that keeps Simsbury a great place to live, work, and retire in.
And now therefore be it resolved, we the Board of Selectmen hereby proclaim June 2024 as Alzheimer's and Brain Awareness Month in Simsbury, Connecticut, and encourage all residents to prioritize both their brain and physical health, take time to thank those who are dementia caregivers, and to help spread awareness of Alzheimer's. And then I've signed this, and here is there's a copy for you, an official proclamation.
that's beautiful. Thank you.
Thanks so much for coming.
first one knocked it out of the park.
Great.
Wendy, do we need to officially move and adopt that as?
Oh, yeah, we do. Yeah,
So
we do.
I move
Thank you.
effective June 10th, the adoption of the proclamation in honors of Alzheimer's and Brain Awareness Month is presented.
I'll second it. All those in favor say aye.
With
Oh.
with one change, just on the version I have, it says Unites States instead of United States, so I don't know if that's on everybody's
Does?
version, but
Mine doesn't say.
that's the one that I have, so. On the
The-
first whereas, 7 million people hit.
Oh, on the
So it's
proclamation.
just a
United
typo.
States, it
I
does
see.
Yeah, so in the
that.
final
Does say
version,
that.
if it could be corrected,
Okay,
it's just
so
a typo.
you have a typo in your proclamation. Okay, we'll correct. Are you-
Friendly
just don't
amendment
show-
accepted.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so we second, all those in favor with the amendment, say aye.
Aye.
Okay. It's over. Okay, now I'm up. I have the first selectmen's report. I just added one this afternoon, and I just want to announce to everybody who doesn't know already that Dan Hurley is staying after turning down the $70 million 6-year offer from the Lakers. And there's a lot of happy basketball and UConn people in the state. So thank you, Dan. My husband is thrilled. A couple of things I wanted to bring up here, and I'm waiting for some information on it, but last week we got a heads up that the state gun range off of Nod Road, which we've been waiting for the state to do improvements to that, and back in 2022, there was a lot of people in town that were advocating against it and reached out to the Board of Selectmen. So a resident reached out to me and said it was on the State Bond Commission agenda on the 7th for $22 million to improve the property. None of us in town hall were made aware, chief wasn't made aware, state rep wasn't made aware, town manager. I reached out to OPM, who's responsible, and I heard back from the governor's chief of staff, who apologized to the town for not giving us a heads up about that. And also, basically pointed out that they are planning to go through with the improvements that are there. It's been a 10-year plan of the governor's. They have looked and turned over every rock to find new locations. These renovations are gonna make it much more functional and address some of the flooding issues, and it will give our state police a better facility for training. One thing he did have me want to point out was that it will not increase the volume of use, so they're not planning to have more state police working there. I did ask if there is an opportunity to have any of the municipal police forces work there. I'm not sure if we do use any of the facility ever, but I did throw that in there as an ask, I guess. And he said he would get back to me. But I just wanted everybody to be aware of that because there were people out there that, are not happy with it, but it does update the training, and I think it will make it look a little better than it does today. Another thing that I'm waiting for is when we did our town bike ride, we rode on the Farmington Canal Heritage Trail. Steve Mitchell was here and pointed out that Bruce Donald from the East Coast Greenway will be sending us something. Again, I don't have it, but basically if you go on those trails now, there are signs that say it's part of the East Coast Greenway, so we are now kind of really being part of it, and I think that leads to better funding opportunities for us. I did want to thank the Alzheimer's Association tonight, and I do want to compliment our Social Services, Aging and Disability Commission, the Library, Parks and Rec programs, and even McLean, who has community programming, for offering services to both our seniors and to everybody that needs them. Congratulations to the Simsbury High School graduates. We have a couple parents on the Board of Selectmen. Steve Antonio and Curtis Looney had graduates, so I just want to give them congratulations. Juneteenth we know is coming, and the Pride flag raising is tomorrow night. And just one last thing, I want to acknowledge all the hometown heroes that we just awarded over in Boy Scout Hall. And these are Linda Schofield, John Nagy, Gloria Rossetti, Polly Gardo Rice, Mark Ornstein, Chris Boswell, Alan Needham, Janice Johnston, Chris Barnett, and Robert Roberts. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mark.
Thank you, Wendy. Good evening, everybody. I'll be brief. Some of my remarks would have echoed Wendy's, and my congratulations as well to all our hometown heroes. I just want to let the board know and the public that we have another retirement at Town Hall. Please join us in wishing Deputy Assessor Jen Russo a fond farewell upon her retirement from the town after 11 years of service. Her last day will be June 28th, coming up soon. Ms. Russo has served as our tax clerk, our tax office aide, an assessor's aide, and finally is our assistant, now deputy assessor. Ms. Russo has also gone above and beyond of what has been expected of her and her duties to the town and to our citizens, and we wish her well in the next chapter of her life. She'll be missed dearly. Her replacement, please join me in welcoming Rachel Taylor as Simsbury's new deputy assessor. Ms. Taylor joins us from East Hartford, where she has served as their real and personal property assistant since 2019. Ms. Taylor is also a veteran and has served with the National Guard and with the Army. Welcome to Simsbury, Rachel. Just want to give a shout out back on Saturday, May 18th. I missed this in one of my reports, I think. Congratulations to the Simsbury Department of Public Works. Kicked off National Public Works Week with an open house and touch a truck event at our facility on Town Forest Road, where we were joined by the Simsbury Public Library, who co-hosted the event, our police and fire departments, and many staff members, members of the Board of Selectmen, and families. Everybody helped make that event a real success. The Touch a Truck was really fun, with over 600 kids and families in attendance that day. And we raised $178 for the Social Services Food Pantry, and we collected over 250 pounds of food for them. Everybody had a great time, and we do look forward to hosting that event again next year. I was asked by Tom Roy, let's give you all a quick update on the Town Hall elevator project. Eno Elevator has been fully refurbished and is 100% back in service. As you know, the Town Hall elevator project is tentatively scheduled for completion in late June. We just want to thank members of the public, and we thanked our own employees recently with coffee and bagels. Thank you for that, Tom, and your team. It's been a successful project so far and is on time. As the first selectman indicated, that the June 19th, Juneteenth celebration is scheduled for Saturday, June 15th at 12:30 p.m. At Simsbury Meadow, and the event link is on our website and also on the simsburymeadows.org website. Really want to thank everybody who has contributed to that. It's going to be a wonderful event. We hear the weather's going to be fantastic. And thanks to the DEI committee and the volunteers that are making that possible, and also to our DPW folks who have agreed to transport all the Lego. And I don't want to ruin the surprise, but a lot of people did a lot of work on this, and we're looking forward to it. On a personal note, I want to thank the Ethel Walker School and Dr. Viz, and I want to thank everybody at the school that gave me a wonderful tour. Also got to attend their graduation. Also, thanks to the Westminster School, had a great tour over there. I just say, as the new town manager and new to the area, what wonderful academic and educational institutions we have in town, and those are certainly our key partners. I got to attend the Ethel Walker School graduation recently, and also the Simsbury High School graduation this past weekend. Want to congratulate the class of 24 and thank the heavens for stopping that rain downpour. One other thing, I just want to report back to the board. We get, in municipal government, wherever you are, you get a good number of freedom of information requests, and Simsbury is no different. Any given week, we may have a couple, we may have a half a dozen. It does create an administrative burden on the town, but we take responding to FOI requests very seriously. With at least one of our public members who files a fair amount of them, we're pleased to report that we're up to date with all but one of them. And just recently, in fact, that individual has withdrawn an FOI complaint to the FOI Commission, noting that under our leadership in the town manager's office, we've now resolved a dispute over what was discoverable and disclosable and what isn't. And just for members of the public on that issue, when you're weighing the right to public information under Freedom of Information, you're also considering things like HIPAA and the privacy laws that govern what we can give and what we can't. There's also a number of exclusions for things relating to litigation. Members of the public and the board know there's 3 items on the agenda tonight that will be dealt with in executive session. You know, that information becomes discoverable after the fact, and certainly we want to do our best to comply with FOI. I just wanted to let the board know that we do take that seriously and we are up to date with our requests. And that's all I have for the time being. Thank you.
Thanks, Mark. Okay, now we get into selectmen liaison and subcommittee reports. I'm just gonna take a moment and say that we are canceling this week's personnel subcommittee. The main item that we had on the agenda, we moved to tonight's meeting, so it didn't have to go to personnel and then come back to the board in an effort to get this out, because as of July 1st, we're eligible to start looking for staff. And with that, I'll turn it over to my peers. If anybody has any updates?
I don't have any reports today.
Okay.
I, of course, have a few. Start with Board of Ed. Again, they had graduation. Congratulations to the class of 2024. Last week, they also had their senior awards ceremony and scholarships that were given out. From the Board of Ed side, they had a workshop on the facilities and enrollment and relooking at maybe moving 6th grade and some other facility assignments. They reviewed their social studies program with a presentation. They had a TerraFill school report, but they're also upcoming tomorrow working on policy revisions for the district and approving the superintendent contract. For the Aging and Disability Commission, all Board of Selectmen members are invited to the Disability Picnic on July 20th from 6 to 8 p.m. at the Simsbury Farms Ice Skating Rink. It is sure to be a great time. It is always well attended and one of the great events of the year. It's a great summer event. And the age-friendly community designation have moved on to the next step after having focus groups. We are moving ahead, and that should be coming back and having meetings with probably Mark Nelson soon. From Culture Parks and Recs, we have a draft summer special events calendar, and if it's okay with Tom, I will happily spread this around to all the Board of Selectmen members so that you can see the draft calendar events. A lot of great things on the board for this summer, so please come and partake at the fun at Culture Parks and Rec. To note is the ice cream social on July 3rd. I think they may still be looking for help, and I know I'm going to be there helping out. There was a Lady Beetle release at Town Forest. They have worked on a new entry sign at Simsbury Farms, and there was a long-term study group, subgroup formation for the Simsbury Farms restaurant facility. For the PAC, we are working on our new agreement. They are very excited for their 2024 schedule, which is available online. And June 28th starts the series with the Talcott Mountain Music Festival with the Hartford Symphony Orchestra, and they're very excited about that. But there's a lot of great things on the docket for PAC this summer. And that's all I have.
Thank you. Cross over to you, Bob. No, just kidding.
I have nothing to report. Thank you.
Oh my gosh. So I'll share, and thank you, Ms. Bolino and Karen, for your comments from the 250th. It's an extra duty assignment that I take on with pleasure. A couple of years ahead in planning, and if those who are interested in potentially giving back and volunteering to support the 250th celebration, I'd happy to be in touch, and there's several others as well. And there'll be more discussion on that on the agenda tonight about one of the ways that we might be able to celebrate. On the Sustainability Committee, one of the questions that I was asked as the board liaison is that they have come up with ideas on projects and all that, and how do we get from idea to something that's actually on the agenda. And I had discussed some things like budget planning cycles and all that. And this is early enough now that this probably is a good time to start thinking about what out years and all that might look like. And the chair has also mentioned that one of their jobs as our representatives on Sustainability Committee is to report out to this board. And so there'll be probably a request to get on our agenda in the future. And so if there are thoughts from this board, I'd be thinking about them now or reach out to Sustainability. But there are probably some ways that with some spending now, we could save in both spending and energy usage down the road in public buildings and other places. So that's one from Sustainability. The last I'll mention on the DEI Council, the Juneteenth celebration is absolutely a town-wide event. I can't think of anything more American than celebrating the time and place where everyone became free. So I look forward to celebrating that this weekend. That's all for me.
excuse me, taking a sip, thank you. Okay, I think we're done with the thing. We're gonna move on to selectmen action. Oh, consent agenda. I have nothing to move to the consent agenda tonight, so I'm not sure if anybody had any thoughts on that, but I felt like everything had something.
We'll discuss everything Monday.
Yeah, okay, will we? Okay. Okay, so but we're good. So, selectmen action, the first item that we have is something that I requested. And in our goal setting, we talked about getting updates on capital projects as one of our goals, and it had come up in our last term with Heather and I, also when Lee Erdman was here, in finding a way to keep the board updated on things that we funded that may have happened a couple of years ago that the project is still not happening. So what we're trying to do is have a placeholder here, maybe every 6 months, to get updates on outstanding items, and I'm happy to hear from board members before the next one to see if there's projects that they would like to get an update on, and then we can funnel them through to the appropriate people. So we have Tom here to give some updates on some projects that have kind of want some updates on. So I'm turning it over to you.
Okay, I got a decent list, but if anything else jumps out, we're open to questions.
Okay.
And I also have some handouts after that has a little bit more detail than I think we need to go through tonight.
Okay.
I think the biggest one we want to start off with is the Terriffill pickleball courts.
Okay.
Some challenges associated with our friends at the federal government with that. The site where the current tennis courts are is where we're going to locate the pickleball courts. We're not being very creative. We're not moving it. However, that is in what is considered the floodway. There's two issues we need to know when we're talking about river flooding: floodway and floodplain. Floodway is where the water is actually moving with a level of force that you cannot build anything in that area. Floodplain is where you have soft, gentle flooding and it's storing water that's going to later make its way downstream. The good news is FEMA is in the process of updating these maps. The bad news is FEMA, and it's been taking quite a long time. We are hoping that the new mapping will be in place this fall, which will allow us to get a very early construction start in the spring, and we will be ready to play pickleball early in the summer of 2025. We did also update that budget to include an additional $100,000 in this year's budget to allow for inflation and some of the permitting and other work that's going to be required as part of that project. The other thing to keep in mind is there are 2 or 3 adjacent projects to that. There is updating the gazebo, and there is also updating the playground. And as we look at it, we may want to work a little bit closer with Parks and Rec to see if we should also take the step to redo the parking lot at the same time to truly revamp the site, since we're going to be doing work in that area, and possibly allowing the town to launch kayaks from that area of the park and eliminate that long dirt road down to the old swing. Nothing good goes on back there.
How do you, oh. Could I,
Sure. Go ahead.
the only question I have is, do we have somebody for the pickleball course? Do we have someone lined up? I know Tom's here, ready to go to do the work, or do we have to go get an RFP for the work after the FEMA maps, which will drag that out a little bit longer?
We have not gone out to bid yet. The other challenge that we have is if we somehow foresaw that FEMA was going to delay the project even further, we get into a very tough discussion, and Tom's here to back me up on this. Right now, we're looking at 6 pickleball courts. That's going to allow Tom and the folks at Park and Rec to run tournaments and other things. If we did 4 pickleball courts, we can stay within the footprint of the existing tennis courts. Even if we were in the floodway, we would still be able to build that because it wouldn't be changing any of the characteristics of the floodwater. So that's our fallback position. So right now, we're trying to wait until we get the approvals from FEMA. Then we'll move forward as quickly as we can.
Another question to that.
Okay.
If there was a appetite to do 4 pickleball courts, we would use less funding. Are you saying that could happen now without waiting for FEMA?
It could happen much quicker.
Okay. Okay.
Okay.
Just I just didn't know.
Yeah, little sound effects back there.
Well, I didn't hear this. Oh, the police sound effect?
No.
What was
No.
the sound effect?
Somebody's phone.
Somebody's cell phone. So,
Okay. Oh, okay. It's down back there. Okay.
So we have the bike trail that we've been working on for a few years. It's going to go from Route 10 to Curtis Park. That project has been stalled as it's being federalized because of the fact that we have the proximity to the wild and scenic Farmington River. This needs to go through National Park Service and Army Corps of Engineers. Adam Kessler, our deputy town engineer, has been pushing the Army Corps with email after email to get them to move. We have finally seen some progress where they're telling us that we're going to have our full Army Corps permit, or at least the review of our Army Corps permit within the next 2 months. Very frustrating, but at the same time, with the new alignment that we're looking at to get into Terrifield, this project has become less critical. However, we've put in so much of an investment, and we have grant funding, we want to still move this one forward.
Just a quick tracing of why Army Corps is involved. I know it's some inland waterways, but why that one?
It's because of the proximity to the wild and scenic Farmington River, and that new designation has made it go through National Park Service, and they are also now requiring an Army Corps review. I can't go any farther into the why, but that is the reasoning they gave us.
Did you say you'll have a write-up, or you have a write-up on all these?
I have a very much more involved summary for you.
Great, perfect. So I'll start taking notes.
So then we have our sidewalk on Firetown Road from West Street to Plank Hill Road, which was funded through 2 different grant funding sources. We are making some reasonable progress on that. We had been doing all of the design in-house up until a point where our staff right now, we have other projects that are taking us away from that. We also found out, due to one of the grant providers, all of our easements, even if they're temporary easements, any land acquisition needs to go through a full right-of-way process, and that has bogged down the project. So we are working now with a consulting engineer to finish up that project. We anticipate bidding that project this fall, and then we'll be able to construct early in 2025. Adam Kessler and Dan Gannon from our engineering department have met one-on-one with every impacted property owner that wanted to have a meeting on that, to go through exactly how it's going to impact their property, what's going to happen to landscaping. So we've really been engaged with the community. It's just slowed down due to the grant. Sometimes in order to get free money, we have to go through some additional procedural steps.
Question.
Yep.
So in the early days of this, it's all grant funded, correct?
Yep.
Which side of the road it was going to be on was an early question, right? Now I know that the plan is that it's on the Hot Meadow side of the road. Is that still an issue on figuring out how that will go along that? Is that all part of
That's
is
pretty
that
well.
design done?
We are probably at a 75% design right now. It's very, very near completion. It is going to be on that east side of the road. It is going to run along Hot Meadow Country Club. We've been in contact with Hot Meadow Country Club. One of their concerns was errant drives off the tee. Those of us who may hook the ball and what that means. We've worked on that with our town attorney. We have asked them if they have a golf course architect that wants to provide input into the types of plants that we're going to use for screening. So the screening is both going to be visual and also have some additional protection from that errant golf ball. As it is, they tell us they regularly hit balls that end up in Firetown Road. We said there has always been a safety concern with that, and we're looking to take reasonable precautions and have an appropriate level of screening with plantings.
But all the federal funding will whatever we have to go through to make that safe, the federal funding will cover that?
That is the federal funding. The state funding is covering the screening plants.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's not going to build a wall. We don't want a wall. It's not going to build a net. That was another thing that was discussed, but there's a lot of downsides to that as well.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. The Meadowwood tobacco shed restoration, or sheds restoration, which I believe we're going to touch on that later tonight as well. That is currently out to bid. That was hung up for quite some time with the state of Connecticut and the challenges associated with the language that we were going to have in our easements and agreements with them. We came to a reasonable solution. One of the concerns was the documents originally required that no matter what happened, if the barn collapsed, we were going to put the barn back up. We had to be reasonable that under certain conditions, if it was a complete collapse, we have to be able to walk away from it. Sadly, in the year and a half that this project has been progressing, the condition of the sheds has continued to deteriorate rather rapidly. One of the concerns we have is, depending upon the bids that we get back in a couple of weeks, we may make a determination to keep one shed and demolish the second one on Firetown Road. So there would end up being only one of the barns left on Firetown Road. Town Forest Park dredging, that was asked. Originally, that was going to be handled by Parks and Rec. Tom Tversky and I met just a couple weeks back. He asked if we could take it over between engineering and public works. It's a better fit for us. Right now, we are going through the Conservation Commission to get all of the appropriate permitting, and that'll be dredged this summer.
Okay, and just so people are aware, that was an ARPA funded item from I think 2 years ago. So that's why I'm just concerned that it hasn't happened. And it was also a priority of the open space. I believe the Open Space Commission had that on their list. So that was one of the things we were doing for them, which is why I'm trying to
Not a
follow
problem.
up.
So at Eno Memorial Hall, we're doing 2 projects now that the elevator is done. We are working on improving the rear entrances, which are the primary entrances used for the building. We are going to widen out the sidewalk substantially, so you're no longer going to feel like you're going down into a hole. It's going to make the lower level feel like a lower level and less like a basement. That project is about 95% complete. That is being done in conjunction with our parking lot replacement project, which we designed in-house, and that is ready to go. And that is also tied in with the Station Street conversion from one-way to two-way. So they're all coming together. We are looking at late 2024 to begin the construction on the parking lot and the entrances.
When does the Station Street change over take place?
We are looking at construction 2025. We're going to get the parking lot done first, just so everything ties in. We are working with DOT, and we have a traffic engineer because the challenge to that is the traffic signal. Exactly. Slim chance that could come a little earlier, but we'd rather under-promise and over-deliver. So Hot Meadow Street connectivity up in the north end. That project has been 90% complete for a while. We got a little hung up with the crossing of Saxton Brook. There were some utility conflicts. The good news is that we redesigned that crossing, so instead of using a complicated wall to hold back the new sidewalk, we're actually extending the culvert but just by a few feet, and that actually is saving us money and will be completed by July. Okay, maybe we can even have a ribbon cutting, turn on the lights. The lights were a nice addition to the project. That was something we were able to slip into the grant as a
Nice.
later in the project. Town Hall parking lot, I don't know if you noticed, it's been dug up. That project went out to bid twice. Both times came back too high. We did some value engineering, and what we've been doing is acting as a general contractor. So each week we have a meeting between Public Works and Engineering and the Highway Department. We're doing a substantial amount of that work using our Highway Department on Saturdays. Using our staff on Saturdays is substantially cheaper than hiring an outside contractor. We own the equipment. We pay for the workforce, but that's it. It's a much more complicated project than it may look at first. It's over a mile of conduit to make sure that we have all of the future cameras, future electrical, pretty substantial amount of underground work that's going to be in there. We now have Mid-State Construction working out back. They built a retaining wall to give the police a little bit more area, Sally Port, make your life easier. Okay, they're right behind me. I gotta make sure they're not nervous or anything, Brad. But we're going to hopefully get the paving done in July. It's going to be messy, just as we were very appreciative of everybody at Town Hall with the elevator. Everybody has been absolutely fantastic in terms of dealing with the fact that it's dusty and dirty, and you come in and there's a pile of cones. We're all working to do this the best we can. And by doing it this way, where we've been the general contractor, we have saved substantial funding. We went from a project that we couldn't afford to a project where we're going to have some little cushion at the end of the project. So those were the main projects I had. If there's anything else going on, I'd be happy to answer questions.
I'd love to hear the savings on that. Is there any opportunity cost, or you weren't able to put your team on to other projects you wanted them on?
No, just because we've been doing it on Saturday. The only challenge we have is now that we're getting into June, I really want to pull our staff back because we don't want to burn them out. It worked out particularly well this year with it being a lighter winter. The funding came out of a different source, but at least gave them a chance to kind of make a little bit more in a year that was a little bit lean for those who rely on the snow overtime. It's also been a little bit of a positive learning experience for some of them doing a different type of construction than they normally do.
Tom, my quick question, and it may be the other Tom piggyback question, because you early on, back to the pickleball courts in Terriffill, you mentioned redoing Terriffill Park playground. Of course, I have to make the plug, make sure that we always look at it from a lens of accessibility and would like to make it as accessible as possible. I know one of the things I forgot to mention in the CPR report is the new swing over down at Weetog Park, and it is a swing that is for those with disabilities, and there's an adult or caregiver who faces, instead of pushing from behind, they sit and face the person on the swing itself. So it's an interactive swing, and it's really kind of an amazing thing, and it's unique, and we're lucky to have one here in Simsbury, and it just adds value to our parks. So I'd like to see more of those as we do more parks.
I'm smiling. I've gone to some seminars where that's been talked about recently.
Yeah.
It's a great thing.
It's a really amazing thing.
Okay, no, I think that's great, and I think we'll queue up more questions for the next time.
Okay.
Or we'll just send something out and ask Mark to give us an update. But I appreciate having something documented. Could we add
Thank
this,
you.
could we include this
Thank
in
you.
the packet so that it's attached for residents? That would be great. Wow, really
Wow.
well done. Okay, thanks so much, Tom. The next agenda item is the Connecticut Highway Safety Patrol's e-citation. Is this, you guys are waiting for the next one, right? Okay, this one I guess could have gone to the consent agenda, but it's a grant about a, do you want to give just a little high-level background on this, Mark? Just so the public understands what it is.
The transportation grant here is a 100% reimbursement. This is the CT-DOT Highway Safety Project for e-citation printer. Is that correct? Yeah, good. Police Department purchased 14 new e-citation printers and associated software upgrades. I'm not sure how old the existing ones are, Chris, but 10 years now, right? So we're pretty happy about this one. The one thing I didn't see in here, and I just asked you to back us up on that, was there a match on this, or this is completely no taxpayer money on it at all? Well, I'll leave it right there. That's
Okay.
always a great grant when we don't have a match and it takes care of something for PD. So thank you very much for your support.
Okay, and one thing I just wanted to just confirm, so we'll get the grant and there's no additional cost going forward for running the printers or any supplies or anything?
Correct, there is a yearly fee, but it's the same that we're already paying. So
Okay,
there's not
that's
any
the question.
increase on what we're already paying.
No increase, okay, that sounds good, we like that, right? Any other
I
questions?
think Stephen would like to have printed citations.
Move to strike.
Second.
This is a fairly specific grant, though, I just thought that was kind of comical, it's exactly, whatever. So I'm gonna ask for a motion effective June 10th to submit an application to the Connecticut Department of Transportation for fiscal year 24 Highway Safety Project e-citation printer grant, and to authorize Town Manager Mark Nelson and Chief of Police Nick Walter to execute the grant application. Move to accept the grant and to authorize Town Manager Mark Nelson to execute all documents related to the grant award. And since this is very specific, move to appropriate the grant's funds and recommend said appropriation to the Board of Finance.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay. Now we're up to the Police Department Axon Agreement. You guys here to talk about this?
Answer any questions?
Okay. Do you want to discuss this?
Let me just give the public and the board a high level, if I can, Wendy.
Sure.
We are essentially asking the board to authorize I call it a re-up of our a long-term engagement with Axon that provides our PD with body-worn cameras, and as you'll see, other technology as well. Typically, these are long-term contracts, which doesn't preclude our negotiating with Axon from time to time to re-up, extend the contract, in this case, add additional resources for PD's benefit, and also an opportunity, importantly, to, I would say, mine the long-term agreement for savings. So I will ask the Deputy Chief to come up and give us a couple minutes on this, because it is, from our perspective in the Town Manager's office, a positive because it saves the town money over the 10 years. But I think more importantly, from the Police Department's view, it adds resources and clarity, no pun intended, to our engagement with Axon. Deputy Chief, you want to come up and just say a few words on this? And while you're doing that, I would indicate too that we had this contract approved by the town attorney as to form and legality. It provides, importantly, for an escape clause if in fact during the out years Either this board or the Board of Finance doesn't approve the funding. And so you'll notice in your motion, if you approve this, that that's also, even though it's in the contract, we were reminded to also include it in the proposed motion that's before you tonight. Deputy Chief.
I'm here with Lieutenant Brad Chase, who did all the legwork, alongside with Lieutenant Matt Christian, probably more so than he wanted to, but he dove right into this project and really did a great job with researching and negotiating to get where we are. So we have an opportunity to realize a substantial savings over a long-term period of 10 years with regard to our taser, our body camera, and dashboard camera systems that we currently utilize. Over the 10-year period, we have a savings range of between $227,000 and $273,000. Just a little bit of background. So in 2015, we entered into a 5-year contract with Taser for Axon for our Taser systems. Subsequent to that, in 2021, we also added to that with our dash cam video as well as our body cam footage, along with the police accountability bill, which mandates that equipment to be utilized. During early budget negotiation or budget hearings this fiscal year with the town manager, he had just kind of gone through this with Poughkeepsie and had some experience in negotiating a longer term contract. So he tasked us with, instead of doing the 5-year contracts, to research getting a 10-year, combining them all, kind of like you see on your insurance bills, right? When you combine and bundle everything, and you get a savings. So that's what we did. Lieutenant Chase was tasked with that. Bundling all these systems together and also extending the contract out to 10 years afforded us the opportunity to realize this savings. I mean, initially, when the town manager had recommended that we do this, honestly, I think we were thinking, maybe we'd save, maybe $20,000 or something over the period. I certainly had no idea that it would be this significant savings. Not only that, but also we could also add to that 2 important features, including what's called an automatic license plate reader in all of the cruisers with the MDTs, as well as an auto tagging feature on the systems. So what that means is, as the cruisers are driving around, this automatic license plate reader it takes pictures of all the different. It's got a camera in it. It takes pictures of all the cars that it passes. It's not live, but it takes. There's not a live feed of video, but it takes pictures of it, and it runs it through the database. And if there's a stolen car, if there's a missing person, it would alert the officer via the MDT system that hey, it's a stolen car. This person's wanted. This person's reported as a missing person. So it would give automatic updates to the officer so they could take immediate action. Additionally, there's what's called an auto tagging feature. So every time the dashboard camera is activated, right, and records something, the officer has to go in at the conclusion and then what's called tag it. So he has to classify what type of video that is. Was it a traffic stop? Was it a motor vehicle accident? Was it whatever the case may be? And there's a couple of different things that have to be done by the officer to tag this information, which is timely and it takes away from other activities that the officers could be doing. Right now there's a backlog of these because there's so much. Everything's being recorded. So by the time the officers get in there, we probably have 600 to 700, videos that are not tagged right now. So this automatically does it based on it pulls from the CAD system and it automatically does this, so the officer doesn't have to do it. It takes one responsibility away from them, lets them get back to what they're, the important stuff that they're doing. So the savings that you're seeing here incorporates those 2 important technologies as well. So I guess at this point, I'll open up to any questions.
Yeah, I was going to point out our public safety chair had an advanced look at this.
Yes, I had the opportunity to meet with all of you and Chief Bolter and our town manager, and It's not often that there's a win-win situation, but in a lot of ways it is. Not only is it a financial savings, but the efficiencies that it provides, the added safety, and even also, I know you didn't mention it, but I believe you had mentioned the company Axon will actually come and change everything out, correct? They also supply all of the technology upgrades that are included in this as well.
Correct, thank you for bringing that, yes. So every 5 years, they would be providing new hardware, new software system, and upgrading all of our systems so that they wouldn't break, they wouldn't have to break, we wouldn't have to get it repaired or anything like that. So it comes with the automatic updates every 5 years. So
One question that I had that was answered, but because of the savings, I asked if we would see any line item reductions in the next budget. I was told we won't see any reductions, but we won't see any increases. So I guess that's a win, right?
Do they take care of maintenance if something between that 5-year period breaks or is not working and
it's all under warranty, so
Okay.
should something malfunction, we would send it back. They send us a brand new one, so everything's under warranty in that period of time as well.
Is there any other questions?
Storage is an issue, is it including storage for the data on there too? Okay. I just don't know, and I figured I'd ask, every once in a while, the automatic plate reader that's referenced, in here, is there any, I know the attorney already reviewed it, but I don't know if there's a civil liberty question in there. I just figured I'd ask, because I don't know the detail or the law on that, so.
Right. So, it's up to us as far as how long information will be stored in the system, right? So basically, anything that's not, I'll say like a stolen car or something like that, like we would set the retention period. So I don't know whether we would recommend it.
So we as far as the retention, we were going to, there's not a state mandate or a state law that dictates what the minimum retention period is. There was a bill back in 2012 that had, someone had proposed a bill as far as what the retention period would be. However, that doesn't exist at the moment, but certainly we want to take into consideration people's rights, people's liberties, things of that nature. So raw data that's collected, there will be a retention period on that will be consistent with other technologies and to protect people's liberty and protect people's rights.
Okay.
And privacy.
Thank you very much.
Okay, are we good?
Yes.
Everybody good? Okay, I'll ask for a motion effective June 10th, 2024 to approve the 10-year agreement between the Town of Simsbury Police Department and Axon Enterprise, Inc., subject to the annual appropriation authority of the Board of Selectmen and the Board of Finance, and authorize Town Manager Mark Nelson and Chief of Police Nicholas Bolter to execute the agreement.
So moved.
Then I'll second.
Okay, any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 Okay, that motion passes, so there you go. Okay, oh, sorry, I didn't mean to be casual. The next item is the State Historic Preservation Office Historic Restoration Fund Grant Authorization. This is regarding the barns at the Meadowood property. I read it, I could explain it, but is someone here tonight that wanted to talk about this? Or no? The barns?
Only if you have questions.
I have a question. That's my job, isn't it, to ask questions?
I was laughing that he was only gonna
Yeah.
answer questions, he was not.
Only if
Oh,
you have
yeah.
questions.
Questions from us.
Okay, I thought it was laughing that I had a question. So this is about, there was a map included about all the barns, some of us that have been around a while with TPL and SHPO and everybody, we're waiting for grant funding and things like that.
Yep.
I'll let you go. I'll let you say what you want to say. Or no.
No, I'm
My
just
question.
fielding
Yeah,
questions.
here's my question. So basically, we're, applying for all these grants, right? And when I looked at the fiscal year CIP dollars, I went back to see what we approved. And I noticed that we approved 57.5 out of Capital Reserve Fund. And then we had a 57.5 in licenses. So is this says 115 from the CIP? Is that the breakdown still, that a 57.5 is just coming out of reserves and the rest is being funded with licensing?
I think licensing was just the line item used within the CIP request form. Is that what you're referring to?
I went to I just was curious because this said 115, that's really what I'm questioning. This said 115,000 cap from the town. And I went to see what was spiked out, and it's 650 in the capital project plan, and it showed 57.5 in capital reserve, 450 in grants, 85 donation from TPL, and then a 57.5 agricultural lease payments.
I think, I'm calling a friend, Amy.
I see Amy here, so I figured.
I think that agricultural leases was money that's been received as revenue from agricultural leases, which is now going to in turn be used to
With
fund.
the part, that's the other half of the 115, so some of it's our money, some of it's leases.
Well, in the lease money is our money.
Well, it's our money
Yeah.
now, yeah,
Yeah.
I guess. I didn't know, I got it. I just wanted to make sure. That was the 115 was the sum total. Okay, that's my question. Okay. Does anybody else have any questions? Okay, thanks for coming up.
Okay, sure.
Looking for a motion effective June 10 to authorize Town Manager Mark Nelson to execute all necessary documentation related to the grant funding for the restoration of the Meadowwood tobacco sheds.
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay, now we're getting to some meaty items here. I'm gonna get out my notes here. Okay, so talking to myself a little bit. So we have in front of us the Simsbury Main Street Partnership Memorandum of Understanding. I'm sure we have questions to discuss this because this has been the way Mark has handled these MOU/contracts. He's had a couple of the Board of Selectmen members kind of work on each one, and then, we had options to weigh in, but to bring them back to the board so that we can flush them out and ask our questions here, and then make any suggestions and go back to, the partnership as needed if we need to ask questions. We also will be appointing the liaison, which last year when we did this, it was our economic development liaison, and I kind of plan to continue that. But I would like to open it up for Mark, if you'd like to give some background on this, and then open it up for questions.
Thank you, Wendy. Just at a very high level, well, first of all, let me thank the members of the board that participated in helping me frame this. Obviously, as a new town manager coming to a number of agreements that were either expired or expiring. It's been a busy time. This particular agreement is notable for a couple of reasons. Number one, it really goes to the heart of one of this board's primary goals that were adopted, as you know, through the workshops and all of your efforts, and that is the goal of economic development in the town of Simsbury. And so as we frame this discussion tonight, I think at a high level again, the important thing to remember is that we've had back-to-back tax increases for our property owners and our business owners, in part because of the exhaustion of federal ARPA money, but in no small part it was because, at least in this past budget cycle, 0.06, hard to even say it, grand list growth. And so this board sees economic development as its number one priority, at least in the immediate term, in order to help us take some pressure off our taxpayers. The second thing I'd say on this is that there is some history with Main Street, which, to some extent may be an elephant in the room. I'm happy to address any questions about that. But the existing MOU will expire on June 30th. And this, before you tonight, is the renewal and extension of that on, I will say, significantly different terms. Number one, we're proposing a 3-year, longer-term deal with Main Street that allows both the town and Main Street to work more collaboratively and to really dig in on some of the issues. My own view has been that, when you do a 1-year MOU, you're really just dotting a couple of I's and crossing some T's, perhaps for funding stream needs or so forth. But, these one-year deals are stopgap measures. We did one recently with CSEA, for example. As you know, this board passed those. And the reason we came to you with the one-year deal was because of issues, with negotiations, resource allocation, and just didn't have the scope and the bandwidth to do a longer-term deal. And I think that that's probably what happened in the past with Main Street. It's been a very long-standing relationship, but in terms of spelling out the commitments of both sides in a legal document, in either a contract or an MOU, I just have to say that the prior effort, I think, was lacking. And so when you compare this MOU that's before you tonight with the one that was authorized by the board and approved a year ago, there are significant differences. Number one, with budgetary approval, we've increased the funding level to $85,000. Number two, we've split the disbursement into two components so that Main Street doesn't get paid all of the annual fee on July 1st. There's deliverables, there's measurable outcomes, there's renewed, you'll see in here as we get into some of the Q&A, that we're trying to foster a stronger collaboration between Main Street and other stakeholders, such as the Chamber of Commerce, our own Economic Development Commission, which, as you know, we are, my term is we're breathing new life into EDC, and all of these things are happening simultaneously. And the foundation for what we intend to achieve over the next couple of years are these MOUs. You're going to have a number of them coming before you tonight. The first one happens to be Main Street. Lastly, I just want to indicate a couple of key things. We had some public comment on this. I, as the new town manager, you hear me say it probably too often, I'm really not that interested in looking backwards. There were issues, I think, on all sides surrounding what was going to happen and whether or not things occurred, particularly with respect to reporting, right? One of our public commenters reached out to me today and again indicated that Main Street had not provided annual reports and all of that. And I just want to share with the board and with the public what my interpretation of this is, because you may not agree with it, and that's your prerogative. But I really want to take a forward-looking approach to this. And again, thank you to those of you that helped with this. But moving forward, we're requiring Main Street to report not just with, send us your 990s and your financial reports once a year, but to actually come in front of the board, as you'll see in this draft proposal, every January, and have a back and forth, make a presentation, and take questions from the board in a public setting. And again, we know that this relates to the economic development goal of this board, but I also want to emphasize that in my view, it relates to the transparency goal. There was another goal a little lower, you'll remember on your list, of improve the transparency and public understanding of these types of agreements, and I think this really does that. Quickly, the main issue here is recruitment of new businesses and retention of our current businesses, and underlying the entire agreement is a renewed collaboration, mainly with the EDC, with the town manager's office, with this board, and with other community stakeholders. I do have to say one more thing, sorry about this, but the town has a planning department, and planning is referenced in the MOU several times. We know the importance of planning with respect to Main Street and EDC and economic development. But what we don't have is we don't have an economic development director position in the town of Simsbury. Bigger communities have an economic development director. Large cities have economic development departments. When you talk about, poaching, I won't use that word, but outreach to businesses in the hopes that they would come and site their facilities in Simsbury or perhaps stay in Simsbury longer, who is doing that? I want to make clear that this MOU is essentially what we're doing is we're outsourcing some of the responsibility for economic development because we don't have the internal capacity to do it. So very briefly, again, as I started in my role, the question was simple. Do we create the capacity internally, which would have been much more expensive, or do we extend and renew our agreement with Main Street? And what I've presented to the board tonight and what our team at the department head level and throughout town government says, is that we want to continue the relationship with Main Street under a better set of parameters that the main ones are collaboration and reporting and transparency. So with that, I'm happy to take any questions about this. You'll note the work plan is attached. That was not done when the last MOU was approved. So the one that is expiring in just a week or two doesn't even have a work plan. This one has Schedule A. Do want to call it out to the board that if you pass this motion, you're also giving us authority to, from time to time, change the work plan. So in accordance with whatever is discussed at, say, EDC or elsewhere, don't want the board to think that we're slipping that sentence in, but we don't want to necessarily have to come back to the board every time we want to tweak something on the work plan or ask Main Street to do something that isn't specifically in the work plan. So it's envisioned that over this 3-year engagement, we will fine tune this as we move along. Thank you very much.
So I do have a bunch of questions, but I want to give other people an opportunity if they have questions. So I don't know, Kevin, if you have questions, or Diana?
Sure. I can start. So I appreciated the schedule, it may be included here as a statement of work, and I appreciated the parts on here that I saw that spoke to some of the concerns that I had, for instance, in supporting development in areas near the airport on the north end of town, which sometimes can be forgotten about. And I think there was a lot of good work put into various areas here. What you just mentioned, Mark, I like the idea of efficiency, so I'm excited about that part, but then I also want to make sure that I fully understand what the role of this board will be in any kind of substantive changes that might go to this plan. So could you talk about your thoughts on that, and then those who negotiated this with Simsbury Main Street as well, what your thoughts and vision were there? And I'll also just mention that I know that this work plan says 24 to 25, and then the agreement says it shall continue until June 30, 2027. So can you talk about what the approval process might look like for this board, this updates to the statement of work, over the full term of the agreement?
Sure, I'll do my best. Might not get this in the right order, but with respect to the date discrepancy, the plan is that on an annual basis, and I think part of this, to your earlier question, is remember that Main Street will be committing to coming before this board every January to do two things. One, look back on the year that's passed, and so these are the things that we did together, and then also to present their vision for what the next year holds. That would be the board's opportunity to have a back and forth and a dialogue with Main Street. Because of that, the work plan we envision would be adjusted every year, at least 2 more times, as we fine tune what Main Street is going to be doing, and we hope to do that every year in February or March as we get the feedback from the board based on the report that Main Street gives us. The second thing I'd say is that and I mentioned it briefly earlier, we are, again, breathing new life and reconstituting, I think, EDC. We've got a newly elected chair and vice chair there, and the meetings have resumed. The EDC will be meeting every month, and what we're trying to foster with this agreement is a better and improving collaboration between our volunteers on the Economic Development Committee and also other external stakeholders. So I think to your question, we want some flexibility in what we're doing because we can't predict what opportunities may come each year. But at the same time, we want an MOU that makes it clear to Main Street that we're committing to this path for a 3-year period. It's not just 1 year. I think you get more from Main Street when you make that commitment as opposed to doing it 1 year at a time, which kind of signals that, well, you know what, we may decide to constitute some internal capacity next year and not work with Main Street. So I think if we want their full commitment to achieving some of our objectives, that the 3-year deal is more appropriate, and we like the authority, if the board grants it, to work and tweak the work plan as we move along. Lastly, I think frankly, we expect and hope that our volunteers on the EDC will themselves be presenting other ideas and concepts and things that we can't fully know in advance. Obviously, we can't predict those. And the question is going to be for my office and for EDC, well, okay, these are good ideas, but who should do it? And the main point we want to leave this board with tonight is the realization, again, emphasizing we don't have an economic development resource. We have a planner and a planning department that really is tasked with working with our boards and commissions on site plan approvals and things like that. But in terms of the outreach to businesses, both those that are here and those that we want to get here, Main Street is the show right now.
Can I tag on to your question?
Please, and I
had
have
a
some
question
subsequent as well.
Yep.
similar to yours. I don't think I'm not sure it was answered yet, but the role of our board. I did not see a lot of mention of our board or elected officials in the work plan or in the MOU. And specifically, again, the two areas that I saw, one is the joint activities on the MOU. Main Street, the town manager and the planning director participate in activities that foster business growth and development in town. And I was wondering if either the policy board or elected officials should be included in that statement, because that is our top goal, and whatever we can do to help foster that would be important.
Yeah.
So that's 5A. And then on page 4, the recruit new business and niche, item 3, work with town leadership to refine existing business incentives and suggest new programs. It doesn't mention the Board of Selectmen in any kind of incentives and initiatives such as tax initiatives, abatements, or anything like that would have to come before our board, and we're not listed there. So I would think that we should be listed on that item too.
We're happy to make any amendments and adjustments that the board wants to adopt. I would just say that in defense of how we've written this, the collaboration was viewed as being with the EDC. And as this board operates through subcommittees and committees, whether it's aging and disabilities, whether it's the public safety committee, or in this case, EDC, none of those things that, at least the agreements that I've seen, specifically reference activities by the board. I think from my view as town manager, it might even be a little presumptuous to build into the agreement, plans and things that you would want to do. Obviously, as the legislative body, we would welcome that. But the focus was on the EDC and building that collaboration with them. So I know that doesn't completely answer your question, Wendy, but I mean, we're happy to accept more involvement from the Board of Selectmen on this important goal. There's no effort to curtail or limit it in any way. We need all the help we can get.
Yeah, and it may not, the way it's worded here, it says volunteer, we're not really the volunteers, but anything that would develop or would have to come before our board. So I just feel like it wasn't mentioned in here at all.
I think I will just mention with respect to tax abatement benefits and other things for the benefit of the business community. I really didn't envision Main Street working on that, to be quite candid. That is something that our tax collector, assessor, myself, our finance director, I think with respect to proposed legislative changes, I would want to depend on staff internally. You don't see it, in fact, on the work plan. In an earlier version of the work plan that was presented by Main Street, we even asked to delete a sentence that kind of implied that we wanted Main Street to work with our zoning commission on updates to the zoning code. That's another good example of what, from my perspective, we're not asking Main Street to do, right? We have the internal capacity in finance, in engineering, in DPW, in the town manager's office to bring good legislative proposals to this board. That's what we do. We don't have the capacity to make phone calls to out-of-state companies suggesting that they come and operate in Simsbury. So there's two very distinct things. One, we need to delegate, and the other, quite frankly, I would be resistant to delegate proposals relative to tax breaks to an outside agency. I certainly wouldn't pay them to do it.
Okay, so I'm still like to see the policy board, our board mentioned somewhere on some of these. This is another side question. When they say Nelson, is that you or is that a member of the board, Nelson?
Where do they say that?
Well, everywhere there's
several
volunteers, is that?
Oh,
the
yeah, that's
member
me.
of-
Yeah.
Because I wasn't sure if that was a member of the board. I thought they had a member that was Nelson also. So you're really not a volunteer, you're the
Right.
you're really staff.
Yep.
Looks like they have Osborne and Seminara listed on
Yeah,
page 5.
Yeah, so it's almost like, I'm not trying to make this more difficult, but I'm trying to make it clear, because if this is gonna stand, I feel like there could be a little bit more clarity in some of the ownership of some of these items.
Is there, Wendy, let me ask you a question. Are there particular areas where you or where the Board of Selectmen would like to be more involved? Obviously, economic development is the number one goal, but if there are, components of this where you'd like us to add in language, we're certainly happy to do that.
Okay.
We just didn't want to presume.
Yeah, I guess, right, the things that I called out was the joint activities, if we're doing stuff to foster business growth, if we're going to meet with local businesses or things like that, it might be good to have the chief elected official or somebody from the board to be part of that group to make sure that we know their needs from that perspective, whether we're going to be implementing them or not, to just understand those needs. And then the same with the business incentives, because we do have I forgot the name of it, business development, some sort of commission that does look at things like that to help businesses, so.
Yeah, business
if
development
that was-
incentives.
Business development.
If that was part of that, I'm not sure if it goes under volunteer, if it goes under staff, if there's a new column of, the policy board or commission involvement. But I do think that, I did feel like that was missing in some respects throughout here. Did you feel that way?
If I could just offer a reaction to what you're saying, Wendy, and I think I understand your perspective on this and the intent, and not having written the document, but I don't think that this agreement would necessarily limit this board's function or responsibility in each one of these areas, but
Okay.
it defines the relationship between the town and Simsbury Main Street as part of them doing this function, and also the money that would be paid to them. So I
Okay.
don't think that it should be construed to limit either the first selectman or a member of this board's ability to do some of that outreach, or our statutory responsibility to set policy and some of the other things we talked about, abatements, et cetera.
So that gets into the information channel on how we know what's going on within this, and more than once a year, right? Like we'll have to.
I would hope so. Mhm.
To be in the loop. But I guess that's my question is, like, we don't want to just, especially if this was an economic development department or division in town hall, we wouldn't have oversight of those, but we would have ability to, through the board, to get information and things like that. So I'm not sure how to have this, but I do think that's a missing piece somewhere. It sounds like just,
The overlap, you mean? It doesn't define where the overlap is or the information sharing.
yeah, more like how do we, if we're going out we're creating these incentives, when do we get pulled into the picture, or do we just assume we'll get pulled into the picture when needed?
Let me answer that. I wouldn't ask you to assume anything. I believe you have a liaison to the EDC.
Yeah, we do.
Okay, so what this agreement does is it creates a more solid and collaborative approach that involves Main Street as being essentially ex officio on the EDC. And our expectation is that Main Street would be in attendance, if not at every meeting, then certainly at least on a quarterly basis. So, if you have a liaison on the BOS to EDC, that is your channel. But to insert BOS in language in an MOU with an external partner, I would echo what Selectman Beal said. I don't think it's necessary with respect, say, to ribbon cuttings or any of these activities that Main Street does. I'll be very candid that the way we drafted this, based on what had been happening, and I'll just say this publicly, is that Main Street should not be running and doing these things without our planning department knowing about it. And quite frankly, the Board of Selectmen and the electeds always knew about it. The communication breakdown, if there was one, was between Main Street and our planning department. And I'm not getting into why that occurred or where the blame lies. We're working very hard to create better working relations. I don't think there was ever a case where, members, elected representatives of the community weren't informed that these events were happening. So to Kevin's point, nothing in the agreement would preclude you doing as much or everything that you'd be willing to do. But we did want to spell out, and the language is clear, that Main Street needs to include our planning department on these things. And it's a two-way street. There's also a provision in here that planning will notify Main Street of every new site plan application that comes in. And so it's a two-way street. We're going to make sure they have all the information. And we want to make sure that our staff is involved in it as well, to the extent they can be.
Okay. I have other questions.
There's a few areas here that talks about budget and then current funding, and then there are some dollar amounts that are there. Can you help me understand what those dollar amounts that are there in budget, if those are new spending areas, if that's Main Street money that's been redirected from what the town is paying, or if this is an additional ask over and above what we've already set
Are you talking
aside?
about the TBDs?
So TBDs are always fun. I saw hard dollars on a couple of these. So the hard dollars ones were the ones that I'm
Like under the
specifically
financial
asking about.
support area
So
town
I'll add
activities?
on the TBDs to that too.
We asked Main Street to to give us a dollar estimate on what things would cost them, and they did that. So what you're seeing is their answers to those questions, and that is their proposed budget, not ours. But it does give the board, I think, the reason it's included is we wanted to give the board some context as to how Main Street sees deploying the funds. I will say most importantly that the 85,000 is less than was approved by the budget process this year. The budget process authorized up to 100,000, and we are not fully funding that, at least not on this particular MOU. And then secondly, as we just did with the Axon agreement that the board approved, the MOU is contingent upon board funding in years 2 and year 3. So, hopefully the board will be satisfied with the relationship and what we've accomplished when Main Street and our team report to the board in January.
Well, I'll ask another question then.
I'll go after you,
Okay.
or whoever.
Yes.
So one thing that so first of all, I'm gonna just state a concern that you've mentioned a few times that I'm going to mention here too, that in order for this to be successful, we need to build a complementary relationship between the planning department, the EDC, and the Main Street Partnership. And I don't know how that will happen and how that will be accomplished, but that to me is key to this whole thing working. Instead of that there's whoever needs what from who is gonna make that happen. And that's probably gonna be on you, but that is a key output of this.
I think you're absolutely right. It's the foundation of it. Agreements can only be written as well as they can be written, and their crafters are, able to do it. I think this agreement, if you compare this to the current agreement that's expiring in June, we are along the lines that you're mentioning, Wendy. And as I said at the top, really focused on collaboration, transparency, better reporting. The success of this in terms of what it actually yields for the community is going to be based on what we can all do collaboratively. And I think that's why, to me, it's very important that EDC is mentioned here a number of times, because we're really, this board, and I think through our charter, we're vesting a lot of hope and responsibility on EDC, on those volunteers. And I hope that they see, with their new chair and vice chair, that they see this agreement as a positive step for the town, and they look at Main Street as a resource, as opposed to an entity that's working in a silo doing its thing. And that's not to take anything away from Main Street at all, because its thing has been successful in the areas that they've worked on for a long time. The town's had this relationship with Main Street, and I don't want anything that I say tonight to take away from the tremendous work that's been done. But what we need to do is we focus on these new agreements is you don't focus on your strengths so much as you try to correct things that have been problematic. And I think we all agree that communication on both sides can be improved. Reporting, both to me as town manager and to this board, can be improved. And I think our expectations for what those deliverables are need to be clearer. And that's why this agreement at least attaches the work plan. But we are asking for the authority to tweak the work plan, as I talked about earlier, because we can't predict everything. And, some of the things that we're doing together with them may work better than others. We're looking for the EDC to give us some feedback on that and to play a role in the relationship. And finally, I'll say I've had conversations with Main Street, with our planning department, and with staff. We are all aware. And remember, as part of our budget process, there was significant internal debate, and even on this board, about increasing the funding for Main Street from the long-standing $50,000 to the $100,000 that was requested in the town manager budget, which this board and the voters, obviously our budget passed. So I think we've got before you a much better agreement. It's not a perfect agreement, and we would certainly welcome any amendments from you that we can, and we could build them in very quickly. Welcome an approval conditioned upon whatever amendments or insertions that you'd like. But we'd respectfully not want to push this to July or August if we can, simply because we've got other things lining up on the runway that are going to take significant time. So if we can find a way to approve this, we're happy to make whatever amendments the board would like to see.
I have a quick question since you brought up the funding, if that's okay, because we approved $100,000.
Correct.
But in this agreement, it says $85,000.
Correct.
$65,000 paid now, $20,000 in January 2025. So where is that $15,000 difference? And then my second point on the financing is, when we see numbers in this work plan, and some of them are TBD, is that to be funded from this $85,000 to $100,000 that we have approved, or are these going to be potentially additional budget requests specifically around like the Wi-Fi in town, since we don't know what that cost is going to be, and where is that funding coming from?
Really terrific questions, Diana. I think you'll see in the agreement, at least at one location, and I probably should have emphasized this earlier, but one of the things we want to work on collaboratively with Main Street is seeking grants and applying for more grants, and hopefully winning some grants. So Main Street has a good track record in history of getting grants, and I think the only minor criticism has been that wish that success was more, that you put in more applications. So for me, when it comes, and we've talked a lot about grant management, you'll recall that as we worked on the budget, one of the first things that we wanted to do was add a grant person, a grant specialist internally. And we weren't able to get there for a number of reasons. But Main Street can be a real partner to the town when it comes to grants. And the answer to your question is that where you see some TBDs to be determined, the Main Street board is our partner in this. We would want to see what grant opportunities there are, and then tweak the budget based on, can we apply for them? And then, of course, most importantly, do we get those grants? So there is an assumption running through the document before you tonight that both Main Street and the town, working collaboratively, will seek grants, and that if we can leverage the $85,000 into more, I think that's one of the deliverables that the first thing you're going to ask Main Street when they come before us every year is, how many grants did you apply for and how many did you get? That's an easy performance metric that I think this board could use. Certainly I would use that. And then the other thing I would say with respect to your question about the 15 was, our interpretation of the budget approval is that matching the Board of Selectmen's priority one goal of economic development, $100,000 was approved. Main Street isn't the only mechanism available to us. There are others. Doesn't mean that $15,000 that we're holding in reserve wouldn't go to Main Street if they came to us with more initiatives. Let's say, for example, the EDC has an initiative that they come up with, that volunteer board is working. And by the way, in a couple of, at least in one meeting I was at with EDC, the discussion arose that EDC hasn't had direct funding. And so if they're the Economic Development Commission of the town, they don't have a budget line that says they can do anything. They can't even go out and make flyers and things like that. We depend on largely Main Street and to some extent the Chamber of Commerce to be our partners there. So we think that holding that 15,000 back is strategic, and that we will find a way to deploy those funds within the fiscal year as it was authorized by the board. So it doesn't mean Main Street doesn't get it, but they got to come to us with something specific for the 15.
If I could add on, that's also to enhance the relationship between EDC and Simsbury Main Street. That was sort of when the discussion arose, was how do we bring these people together that have all been succeeding on their own, but to run as one engine. So that, to answer your question, the money's not gone. It's just still, we had put it as discretionary, and it still is. And hopefully, there will be some use on it. But I do want to speak on a couple things. The volunteer responsible is a horrible heading. Shouldn't have been there.
Yeah.
Should have said person responsible, because many of this is staff. This is a 3-year plan, but it is not funded for 3 years. It is funded for 12 months at a time. That is our direct supervision. I would suggest that potentially the liaison or myself, pretty much Simsbury Main Street in the recent past has been centered on coming up with a work plan, which you see in front of you, the architecture of that work plan. So there has not been much to report back because the work plan was still being developed. Now that a work plan is being proposed, the implementation of it can be reported on. We have monthly, bi-monthly meetings. We can bring up where Main Street is on the work plan. I haven't been able to report much back from Main Street because this is what Main Street's been working on, is what we see in front of us, and also working with Mark. That is our direct contact with Main Street. But just to circle back and reiterate, we're funding them for 12 months at a time. We asked them where the money would go. That's what these numbers are. They're not hard numbers that we are going to purchase these 4 things, and this is the price of 4 things. This is, what do you think you're going to do with the $85K? That's what you see in front of you, is a justification, if you will, or rather a prioritization that they see of utilizing the funds that we're entrusting them with to spur economic development, which, just to circle back one more time, is a necessary priority for this board that we have all reiterated. Mm-hmm. We do not have an economic development person on staff with our town. We do not have that choice. What we can do is delegate to a body that has been sort of fulfilling that role in the interim, and also bring on the EDC in a more instrumental fashion and sort of re-up and go after some economic development, but we need it desperately. And I would just reiterate that expediency is necessary here. We already had our 0.06 growth year. Mm-hmm. We don't want to spend another year seeing if we can get it to 0.05. The amount of money we're talking about, I am not belittling the amount of money, but it is not much for what we bring in for taxes on economic development. Economic activity is what I meant to say. So I love the questions, and I'll be happy to jump in with Mark, but he's so much better at this than I.
You're pretty good, Steve, here.
But I think this is a necessary thing, and I don't think it's a leap of faith that we're locked in for 36. Just like the police thing, we can back out. Granted, we have an agreement, but if we don't fund the agreement in year 2, it's a moot point almost. We have that. So it's sort of like the taser people are giving us the benefit and we can do what we want. That is also the same as this agreement, that it's a leap of faith, but we also need to give them some skin in the game, if you will, that we're going to support them for 36 months. And one last thing, and then I'll return to question and answer period. The previous MOU stunk. I can't reiterate that enough.
We're not looking backwards, Steve.
If we did look backwards, there was no real thresholds. It was so loosely worded. It was good that we had something, but that essentially is what we had, something. This will be fine-tuned over the future as it develops as a work plan. But from where we have come, without looking back too hard, this is a giant step.
Okay.
So that's that. And thank
I
you.
think that's going to be a recurring theme on all of our MOUs as we go
Oh, yeah.
forward with this.
I look forward to it.
They get harder.
I think it's great.
So let me try to, a couple things. I think that there's one thing in this MOU in the term that I really feel needs to be in here. And then what I would like to say is if we approve the MOU with this change I'm gonna propose, which may or may not agree. But I would also like to say that the Schedule A needs some tweaking to some extent.
Is this a living document?
Like, yeah, I feel like this, I have more questions on here. I mean, I don't know how long we wanna spend tonight, on this. I do have some questions on some pieces of the strategy pages. So that's, we can, I'm just saying,
If you were willing to, I'd like to, because if we don't do it now, we're
to go
burning
through
the
them?
clock. This
Right.
is the
Yeah,
presented
in July.
work plan,
Okay,
so
so-
if you wanna take it apart, let's do it.
But is this going to be a living document, like that is changeable, or are we setting it in stone? That's what I'd like to know on this.
You're delegating the ability to tweak the work plan to me, so that in conjunction with EDC and with this board, we can tweak it without having to take legislative action every time we make a change to the schedule. That's why the motion's written that way. I do agree with Steve that well, let me just say, it is a living document, Diana, and it can be easily updated.
Without changing the.
Without changing it. This board's primary authority is as the town's appropriating agency. Its primary authority is not overseeing the Department of Economic Development. What I'm asking the board to approve is essentially outsourcing it, because $85,000 is a lot less than, with benefits and FICA and fringe, what it would cost us to hire someone to do this internally. So this is a savings to taxpayers, but we're not delegating to the board or shifting to the board direct oversight of every individual thing in the work plan. As Steve says, you can always unfund it.
okay,
If I might add too, as I understand our government, we are the Board of Selectmen, and we have our town manager that sort of implements what we have. The town planner doesn't report to us.
right.
So under that same vein, I don't think, with the exception of a liaison, I don't think that they would come directly to us. I think they would go to Mark, would be sort of their supervisor, for lack of another term. Maybe not the best term.
That's the right
now that I
You
think
like
about
that
it.
term, so,
All right. But so I think there is that buffer between Mark and us, that Mark is the direct administrator of this document, if you will.
and so that leads to a good point, but this would be one of Mark's key goals when we rank and do his review, is where he performs on this,
Yeah.
right? So if I take it from that perspective, we can refer to this and see where some of these things are, and when we look at.
I couldn't agree with that more, Wendy, and I think, again, I will say, on a positive note, I really do appreciate the board's trust in giving us the flexibility to tweak the work plan, and that's why I wanted to draw that to your attention, not slipping it in. It's an important delegation of that authority, because if you wanted to require us to come back with you with every change in the work plan, you certainly have the authority to do that. But I appreciate the delegation of this, because we've got to tweak this in conjunction with what Main Street feels their priorities as well. This is a partnership, more than my directing traffic. What are their capabilities? What are their resources? And back to the earlier point, what grants can we get? Because if we apply for a grant in this little space, then we're going to do that work that we got the grant for and maybe less work over here because now we've got that financial resource and the capacity to do something. So we think it's really helpful if we can tweak the work plan from time to time. And I would say it's not a perfect work plan today. But we did ask Main Street to start this and give us their best plan because they were in a much better position to do that than I was. So much of what you're seeing is what they're saying they can do.
Okay, so I have one change that I would really like to see. And you could beg to differ, just, and the term. So basically, all the term says is, we're saying it's a 3-year term subject to the annual appropriation of funds by the budgetary authorities. I would like some wording in there, and I know it's assumed that the annual appropriation requires some form of performance or diligence, but I think it would be beneficial to call out somewhere to make sure that the 3-year term, we either do an annual, and I know we're having an annual review that we're meeting the expectations of what we expect as a lead into appropriating the funds. Instead of just sitting down and talking about the budget, we want to make sure that the measures or the things that we're calling out that we expect to happen are happening. And I know it's assumed in there, and I don't know if anybody thinks that that's just being picky, but that was just something.
If I may, Wendy, I think you're right. I wouldn't say it's assumed, but what I would say that you have that authority as part of your annual budget process. So you have they're coming in front of you every January, as we talked about, but this idea of whether or not you're going to appropriate it in the second year and the third year is part of the budget process. And that's your opportunity to call myself or department heads or anyone or Main Street in and say, hey, make your case for the funding. That's separate from the reporting requirement. So again, I keep emphasizing that your appropriating authority is really the key to what you're talking about. It doesn't need to be in the contract.
Okay, the only point I will make is when we're not here anymore and this just comes up to reappropriate the funds, someone may not ask what's the reasoning behind the appropriation? No, it's just a carryover from year to year. That's kind of where that stems from, but.
I agree.
But.
Isn't that what we do during the budget process though, is go line by line? It's still gonna be a line.
But what Wendy is saying is, we all understand the history, or right now, next year, we'll understand the history, but when there's a new election and we're still in this 3-year plan and there's a new board, then they may not understand the history or the terms or what the expectation was and make assumptions, or,
But
I think it's what she's trying to say.
It is
right?
what I'm just, yeah.
But that's what we do during the budget, is we analyze our return on investment and consider future investments. So I'm just, I guess what I'm not following is how would you impact it other than the budget? Because we have the budget is the budget, whether it's us or the next administration or a future one. So how else would we impact the work plan without having the purse strings? Because that to me is the ultimate.
I'm trying
control.
to tie the two together, I guess, that the appropriation of the funds, and it's assumed it's dependent on, because of the 3 years, really kind of what's going to me, is we do review it every year, but what is the basis for the renewal is kind of, I guess, how I would say it. What is the basis to agree to extending the contract and refunding it next year?
So I have a question then. Would it be potentially under the the SMSP activities and expansion of H, where you would like to include some measurable goals or a matrix of measurable outcomes and goals? Because if they're going to present their annual update to the Board of Selectmen in January, which is prior to our budget, and that would be then included in our budget discussion, not just include what their activities have been, but maybe some updates on measurable goals from
The current.
the work plan or potential updates to the work plan.
Yeah.
If I could expose my naivety, how are we gonna apply the town manager's goals and review them? How is that done? It's a genuine question. This isn't a
Well,
circumventing.
It would be, we do a performance management review, like a formal process among the board to look at his, which we don't have.
So is that what you're implying we should have for Main Street every year?
In a lesser sense, that we should be looking at the deliverables and I like Diana's idea. So instead of just saying an annual update, the activities for the calendar year, just something about, or are we gonna say it's assumed, where do we stand on the work plan?
Yeah, like let's get an update to the work plan. What have we met? What has been added? What has been expanded? What has been tweaked? So
include words there, then provide an annual update to the Board of Selectmen each January to include Simsbury Main Street's activities for the calendar year, based on the strategic work plan. I mean, just change those words.
because some things may be met in here, and then there may be a new goal or expanded to this goal because, I look at this and you're like, okay, task 1 and 2 have been met, so we're on to 3, or we've now added 4 and 5, which didn't exist currently. So I think that would be great as part of the annual review.
I agree wholeheartedly. Who
So
wants
you-
to come up with the verbiage? Do you?
Yeah, so I would just say that present an annual update to the first Selectmen each January to include Simsbury Main Street's updates to the strategic work plan for the current year.
Right.
I find
Right,
that
and understand
a
it's
great
measurable goals.
addition.
See, I look at these as measurable goals.
Yeah.
And
That's
I
what they're
think,
supposed to be.
yeah, and so I think we have included in there is an update to the work plan and a status on the measurable goals.
So I think that what you would want to reference is the update to, if it's Schedule A or whatever it
Schedule A,
is.
yeah.
So since
Schedule
you're
A.
referencing that at the top in section 3.
And we're in 3H, right? Oh, I
Yeah.
see. It's,
As more fully set forth in Schedule A.
can somebody craft, yeah, and also, and then the outlook for the year ahead as it relates to the strategic, any changes to the strategic plan, really, right? Because I guess the question is, everything that we're gonna do with Main Street going to be documented in the strategic plan? It should be, correct?
I think so.
Okay, so if we include it that way and we say that the annual update will reference the strategic plan updates and activities that are accomplished and met, and also what the future plans are for the coming year, however, the wording for that.
Sounds great. Gives accountability.
Yeah,
Right. And I think that's what we are looking for, and I think that's what the public would like to see is transparency and accountability for this partnership, within this partnership.
Yeah, we're fine with all of those recommended changes. And we can capture that if somebody just wants to, on the approval motion, insert
with the new changes.
with changes as discussed.
Okay. With whatever words that fit what we said. Okay, if we're still talking about the plan, I have a couple of things. I did really go into this, so I just, I don't wanna. So Diane mentioned this, and I had asked this question before, but one of my big things is this whole free Wi-Fi to the downtown area. Is there a way that we could include the word, explore the feasibility of doing it without saying that we're going to do it? Because isn't doing it a decision or discussion of the Board of Selectmen? And it's, the way it reads to me sounds like we're automatically planning to do it, but if it costs the town, $500,000 to give free Wi-Fi downtown, is
So
that
the
something?
quote, to give some perspective, I
Okay.
know not all the dollar figures are announced, but we're talking about 20,000. And we're giving Main Street 85,000. And the way I interpreted this, which may, feel free to correct me, Mark, is what are you gonna do with the 85 is what we asked. And maybe they should have put 20,000 as an extension to give you some framework. That's something they think is gonna bring vibrancy and economic development to the center of town, to be honest. Better cell phone reception. But long story short, it's not a $500,000 thing. This is something that is in their pocketbook, just like when we give everyone their little pocketbooks at budget. If it's something that's above and beyond the pocketbook, that's got to come to us as a supplemental. If it's in their $85,000 budget, I think it's up to them to figure which is the attainable tasks as they're accountable to us. You look confused.
Well, are you saying that the paying for the Wi-Fi for downtown is included in the 100,000?
That was my understanding. Mark, please
Okay.
correct me if I'm wrong.
No, you're not wrong, but it's included in the 85,000 if in fact they decide to do that. The reason it's TBD is back to Diana's question about the grants. There was a discussion between myself and Sarah Nielsen about this, and maybe a slight disagreement on whether or not the grant opportunities have dried up for call it downtown Wi-Fi, right? A few years ago, there was a lot of money on the table for this, and you know, I that's new in my mind is we've got it. So you know, Sarah's position was when we discussed this on the back and forth was, yeah, you know, a lot of those opportunities have gone by the wayside as COVID relief monies have dried up and stuff. I'm not quite so sure. So I think where I landed was we need to look for grants before we greenlight this, but put it in the work plan. So it's in the work plan as a TBD. If we're all satisfied that we can't find a grant, I think it's Main Street's plan, and I would support going ahead and doing it. I agree, it does stimulate economic development. Many other municipalities have free Wi-Fi in their downtown or in their parks. We put it in our parks in Poughkeepsie, in fact, although we got a grant to do it. But so I think the Wi-Fi is they put it on the plan. We like it. We just are not quite sure if we want to spend our money before we fully explore the grants.
Okay, so it's not committing to doing Wi-Fi downtown, it's doing kind of the feasibility of Wi-Fi downtown. Like, do we want, what are the benefits, what are the costs, who has access, where is the access, is there any security risks, I don't know, I'm just saying, to me, given the whole downtown Wi-Fi, just seems like do businesses get to use this Wi-Fi?
Sure.
Or do they, so then they don't need their own Wi-Fi?
If they're willing to depend on the free Wi-Fi, again, the devil's in the details. It's the quality of the Wi-Fi, the quality and the redundancy of the system, who's providing it, a number of things. But, you know, businesses can make the decision to jettison their own plan if they want to and run on the town's free Wi-Fi. That's their decision to make.
If I could jump in, a business would never do that because it's unsecure.
It's a little risky.
Although if you have somebody who's just like a personal,
Small
like
startup.
they're a startup or they, you know, like so many people, I'm going to call this out, you know, they're people that work in Caps or the coffee spot, you know, they're just independent contractors and they go with their laptops and they do their work and they utilize their Wi-Fi. So they could utilize town Wi-Fi in another location potentially as an independent contractor.
Correct.
Okay. I don't leave the Wi-Fi alone, but. I have a question on page 2, number 3. What is UA? Or who is UA? Oh, unassigned. I have no idea.
Right.
Oh, thank you.
It's Wendy Maxudis.
I want to be WM.
United Airlines, they're coming in.
Okay, unassigned, thank you. Cost, other towns, no. Okay. Yeah, I think the last thing, and then I will really stop, was on page 5, and I guess this falls to you. Work with town to develop specific pieces of property, commuter lots, parcel, adjacent. It says us, town manager's office, property owners. Isn't this something that the planning department does or not? And should they be listed? Because we need RFPs or things like that, right? If we were gonna look at different pieces of property.
I'm not sure I get the question. I think one of the things that is a shared goal is, and we've gotten questions recently, I think, from members of the Board of Selectmen. We are working on an inventory to identify all town-owned properties. That is an internal function. Main Street is doing it on their own as well, and that's fine. They're not doing it on our dime, but we have the internal capacity to do that, and we're doing it. Unrelated to that, I've asked the planning department to give me a list of all properties in the town that are vacant, whether or not they're town-owned, right? So it's two separate things. We want to identify what the vacancy trends are, but with respect to economic development particularly, Main Street's interested in what spaces are empty and rentable, and we think that's where they would target their efforts to get businesses into those vacant properties, if that makes sense. So, but to the question, we don't have the resources internally currently to make the outreach necessary to hope to bring new businesses in. We have the capacity to identify the buildings and the vacant spaces, but with respect to the outreach, that would fall to Main Street.
So will Main Street be the ones who are putting together the deck to go after outside
In conjunction with my office. Yeah.
businesses?
Yeah, and I
So
think.
they'll be working with you on a deck
Yeah.
of what makes
And they're,
Simsbury
you know,
attractive and what type of businesses we should be
Exactly
going
right.
after.
And to that point, Heather, while I wouldn't put it in the plan, you can imagine that there's going to be more than one deck, right? Because you can't just do a deck and say, well, I'm going to go out and I'm going to market this business and hope to use that same deck with some other business. So there's a lot of work involved here, and my office will be actively engaged in this over the next 3 years if this is approved.
Is your, the information you're gathering not just on vacant buildings and properties, or is it also undertaking parcels that could be developed, like developable areas and properties?
No, well, it should be, but it isn't.
Okay.
And good point. We'll certainly add that to the work plan. Thank you. If the parcel is vacant, not
Yeah.
owned by the town, but subject
Right.
to development, I think where you'd probably find that more likely to come in front of us is with respect to housing
Housing, yeah.
and development of housing at all price points rather than the business development, right? Who's going to come in, build a brand new complex when you've got so many vacancies and likely more coming? I
Right.
hate to say, can those buildings be rehabilitated into a new purpose? You'd want to do that before you put commercial or non-residential on bigger lots. I think the at least the board's goals, I think, have been highlighting bring economic development in is a big one, but housing is a close
Right.
second or third, and those properties are probably more.
Well, I'm thinking of like specifically in the north end of town and out by the airport and what areas and parcels there could be
Well, that's
developable.
yeah.
Like, I'm not talking,
Yeah.
where you would think,
You want a hotel? I think that's a great. We will.
Yeah. So those are the type of things, when I think of the north end airport and then the far south end, that could be parcels that where development outside of residential could happen. I understand that we have vacancies within current properties right now,
Right.
mostly in this corridor. There's, some, outliers, but then how do you attract those businesses in areas to say we have this wonderful
Yep.
parcel that could be developed for retail or commercial use, and that would be a great tax base for us.
We're going to replay the tape, and thank you
Yeah.
for that suggestion. I think it's probably already on somebody's mind at EDC, but
Yeah.
I think that's very good. Thank you for that.
Okay. We got all that?
Are they gonna really get, my only last question is off your deck kind of thing is your information,
What number page are you on?
9,
Tell me.
marketing and tourism and branding.
Yeah, this one is, I'm almost hoping this one didn't come up.
Yeah, sorry.
Right at the end it does, right? And if I can reframe the question, what's the interplay between economic development and tourism, right? And to what extent,
yeah.
right? And we're just getting into some of those discussions. I think, again, the older version, if you will, of EDC had folks working on tourism. I think there might have been, predates me, of course, but others have worked on tourism in the town over the years. I don't know enough about it to really tell you
Yeah.
anything at this point, but
I think
to
if
me,
they're
I
gonna-
don't know
yeah.
how tourism in and of itself, I'll just say, how does that grow the grand list? It increases sales tax revenue. I know in New York, Poughkeepsie got a piece of the pie on sales tax revenue that was above a floor. But, I'm not that familiar with, if you ask me today, I want tourism, but I'm not sure how tourism grows our grand list.
Right,
It puts money in the pockets of our businesses.
which is great,
Who want to stay
right.
here.
Who want to stay
We
here.
want to stay here.
Right.
But I think when we talk about branding and marketing, if we're gonna, to create decks and to really go after businesses and help strengthen our businesses, I think it needs to be more than just what's in here, quite honestly.
Yeah.
So I'm just gonna leave it at that.
Is there a tourism subcommittee?
So there was a Simsbury tourism
Not sure the
board
history.
that got nixed.
Really?
And it got canceled in 2020, before you came on the board. It was the last board before this board, end of 2021. Right, you came in you came in after that. So it was right before. Remember, we got rid of a couple other things.
Well, I'm happy to have those discussions. I need to learn more about whether we, and how we reconstitute that, but
I think the Chamber of Commerce has done some things with tourism in addition to Main Street Partnership when it comes to maps and things like that. I don't really know who's
Yeah.
where on that, but.
okay.
The library is also looking into ways to generate kind of more info for tourism since they're a building that's open 7 days a week.
Great.
Okay, and to just add, the person who was on the Simsbury Tourism, who had a Simsbury tourism page, still has the Simsbury tourism page. So she had reached out to me and I talked to her. She's a very big advocate and supporter in the community, Dominic Avery. And I said, when we get back to you, because she's kind of keeping that page up, but I think it's a town page and probably shouldn't be done by just some person. So that's something
Sitting in their house.
to put in the
I
list.
think she came to an EDC meeting.
Oh, because she did. I
Same with Lisa Hefner.
yeah,
I got to meet her.
Yeah, because I did get
Very nice.
Charmaine sent an email or something, but, so I just wanted to mention that when we were talking about tourism and who owns what. I'm gonna wrap this up, hopefully.
I think
I
Kevin has
have a couple things.
Oh, okay.
So I have some substantive.
She's been sitting, waiting for me to stop
requests for
talking.
changes. So in item 3 in the activities section, in letter G, it says monitor applicable grant opportunities and collaborate with the town to promote greater grant application activities. I'd like to strengthen the language and say to identify, prepare, and submit grant applications in support of the work plan set forth in Schedule A and other opportunities that may arise in collaboration with the town. So I can restate that if you need me to.
I agree with that.
I like
And we can rerun the tape.
Yeah,
but
I
it
do as
sounded
well.
right.
Okay, great.
So you want us to put it into the
Yeah.
agreement?
Yeah.
Not just monitor, we want to actually,
Yeah, rewrite G, basically.
Totally fine.
Okay. Also in the section number 2, going backwards, under the term, I'd offer some additional language. The parties may re-examine this MOU and make any necessary adjustments based on a mutually agreed upon assessment of the collaboration.
Yeah, that's kind of where I was going before.
It just,
I think.
it strengthens
But
the
if you wanna
reality that
say
it's a
that,
living
that sounds
document
great.
and that we may open the agreement up to change. I don't know others' interest in this, but we talked about it with regard to the length of it, and I have no concern about, in general, working with Main Street on this. I think that there's, sort of the best game in town in that regard. But I do think that there's some reality to the lengths of our terms and also the budget cycle. So I would say that the end of the budget following this board's term probably makes the most sense. And so that would take it to June 30 of 2026, if I'm correct. So if we change the term just down to 2026, I know that shortens the total length of the term, but I think it's appropriate considering what our responsibilities and authorities are, both for what we're agreeing to tonight and the budget cycle that we can actually influence. With the intent, though, that it's highly likely that we will renew an agreement. It's also not uncommon to add language along the lines of this agreement will be automatically renewable upon the consent of the parties or something like that. In case Main Street felt like we didn't have enough skin in the game or something like that, I think that would be reasonable. So those are my 3 recommendations.
Sound good to me.
Okay.
Right?
I think the only thing I would maybe push back a little bit on is the shortening of the term. A good amount of work and a good amount of dialogue has gone back and forth. I think, if I understand your point, you want the termination, you're suggesting the termination coincide with the change in boards. Really, what that creates is a need to, with a brand-new board,
Start all over.
get your town manager back in there to go over the whole thing again. And I think that I would agree with you, Kevin, if Simsbury had staggered terms. In other words, if 2 of the 6 selectmen were up for election every year instead of wiping out the whole board, and this is something I'd recommend that you deal with as part of the charter. But if you're gonna wipe out the entire board, please don't change the term. And leave it to your town manager to educate potentially 6 new board members.
Yeah.
So that's also why I thought it was appropriate to not have it expire in December of the year that our terms end. It goes to the end of that budget cycle, which is what, has been approved, and that new board, you'll have 6 whole months to get them up to speed mark. And if the overwhelming change of the composition of this board is a reason why we hesitate, I think that unfortunately that's also the reality of what democracy gives us. And that might be a reason to review and renew some of these things. And I apologize for the extra stress that puts on the hired town staff, but that's also the responsibility of us as a democratically elected board.
Well,
So
does that
that's why I'm bringing it up.
Does that then limit the other MOUs we're going to be
Right.
working on so that they will all go until the end of the term? I mean, I agree with your point, but at the same time, I also agree with the point that there is continuity in the town staff, while there may not be 100% with the board.
If we keep your other language in too, which either party can cancel the contract, it's sort of redundant to truncate the term, because if the new board, if you will, I mean, how'd you know I'm not gonna get reelected already? But anyways, they could remove the budgeting. They could also cancel the contract with the other verbiage that you offer.
It's actually the main reason why I'm asking to shorten it, because I think there's too many things in here that make the agreement already squishy. The work plan also that's referenced here says 24, 25 on the title. It goes 24, 26 on here, but the agreement goes to the end of 27. So there's just actually quite a bit of inconsistency here. And so what I'm trying to do is get us to yes quickly. I think that shortening the term for me, makes sense. I wouldn't personally stop the, I wouldn't want to hold up the vote on this over that issue. I do think that the other 2 recommendations, made are appropriate for this agreement and would feel more strongly about. So that's my thought, because we had the discussion.
Kevin, can I just ask you, where does the Schedule A say 24, 25?
So in the title here is where I saw it. In the title of the document, it says 24, 25.
This one?
Yeah.
Yep, and at the
Mine says 24 to 26.
I know
That was the old one.
there's three different places where these dates are referenced.
Oh, okay.
I don't intend to bring that up as a means of criticizing the people that generated the documents. I'm just saying that any ambiguity in an agreement is the responsibility of the generator, and that is us. So.
Well, I'm just trying to understand where you, because I want
Where
to
the
see the same
24
thing that you're talking about. That's why I'm just trying to understand it.
Yeah.
So.
It's in the title of the PDF document or whatever.
colorful
that
one.
we were sharing.
Mine's in black and
Yeah.
white.
So this one? Okay.
And if I could, Wendy, I agree with Selectman Beal on the two issues that are of most concern to him. So
I'm wondering if he's.
if he's willing to withdraw the attempt to diminish the term, we're happy to make sure that we rerun the record and get,
Yeah.
I mean, that's what's important to you. We're
Yeah,
happy to.
if you want to call a roll on each one of these, Wendy, I think that we're sort of doing them by a claim. And so I'm just saying I don't need to make a motion and have us vote on the term of the agreement. I'm offering that because it was my perceived solution to a concern that was brought up during the discussion. I do think the other 2 are important, and it sounds like others agree.
Okay. So I'm not really sure where we are anymore. I think I know where we are. We have changes. We're gonna, just to summarize, we have changes to sections, before I read them, okay? To G and H, I believe. For sure, right, section 3G and H. I think we're leaving most of what's in the work plan as is, given the nebulous nature of it.
I think that should be updated just where it says, through 27, if the term is gonna be through 27.
On the top, you're saying,
Yep.
page
Yeah.
24 to 27.
Correct.
And then that will line up to the 27 end date,
Correct?
but we'll also include the words that you said before the year, the date for use, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so.
Yeah, the parties re-examine the MOU, et cetera, et
Yes, I
cetera.
like that.
Yep, got it.
Re-examine, blah, blah. Okay, so I'm gonna take a stab here. It's really, gonna ask for a motion effective June 10th, 24, to approve the memorandum of understanding, the Simsbury Main Street Partnership with the updates discussed to section 3G and H and also 2 in the MOU itself. And execute the agreement and to amend the work plan. Did I say authorize town manager Mark Nelson? I don't remember.
Not yet.
Amend the work plan from time to time. So that's one thing. And I'd also further move to appoint, as I've said before, to me, the MOUs, the liaison should be the person on the most closely related board and commission. And in this case, right now, Steve Antonio is the EDC liaison, and we have to trust that he knows when he would need to step aside as a professional and as a making a commitment to this board and, right? So I would further move to appoint Steve Antonio as a Simsbury Board of Selectmen liaison to Simsbury Main Street Partnerships Board of Directors with a term expiring on December 1st, 2025. So we'll see if you get reelected, because then we could just fill in somebody else
It'll
here.
solve itself.
If any of us are here at that point
So
in time.
just for my understanding here, we do appoint members to boards and commissions as a full board, but often liaison appointments come from the first selectman. So does this board need to vote on that item?
So so that's a good point. It's because no one embodied the Simsbury Main Street Partnership liaisonship as the EDC person, I don't think. I think it was, what's the word, implied, but maybe not stated. I did state it last year when we did this, that it should be the EDC person, as I did the public safety chair would be the liaison for SVAA. I don't know if that's documented anywhere, which is why this motion is in here, I believe. So you're saying we may not merely need this motion?
In my opinion, it's unnecessary.
I agree, but it's here, so I'm making the case again to somehow make sure that the liaison to EDC is, when the next first selectman makes these assignments, that the person for Main Street is also the EDC liaison. Does that make sense?
It does.
Okay, so they're all out on the table, all those motions. I need somebody to move them.
So moved.
I need a second.
Second, I'll make a friendly amendment. You love those. Why don't we just say the economic development liaison is the Board of Selectmen liaison to Simsbury Main Street Partnership?
There
Good
you go.
idea, rather than naming
More
it.
elegant.
Rather than naming, yeah.
Okay, and I did say
And it
that
was
last time,
accepted
but,
by the.
so nobody took it down, so thank you.
Okay.
So, any further discussion?
Friendly amendment accepted.
Okay, any further discussion?
No.
All those in favor say aye.
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 Okay. Also, I just want to point out, we did pass the 2-hour, we can't add those, any additional business to the agenda, right?
They're already in the
Oh, the
agenda.
action items are?
Yeah.
Oh, you're pretty clever.
I saw that. I noted that.
I didn't, I thought this was gonna be
Potential
shorter.
action
He didn't
is
make-
added.
Tom didn't make any plans for that.
Okay, so I'm sorry for people that are here, and waiting, because we can't add anything else to the agenda. Okay, proposed reappointment of Mike Berry. We could have put this in a consent agenda, but since this is up to us and it happens infrequently, I thought we should just have it on here in case anybody had any discussion items, but I will ask for a motion effective July 1st to reappoint Michael Berry as the Emergency Management Director for the town of Simsbury. This designation shall remain in effect until revised, rescinded, or Mr. Berry's separation from service, whichever comes first.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay, so you'll probably get through this next one quickly because it's so late. So this is the proposed job description for the town hall administrative specialist. As we all recall, this was one of the newly created positions that we discussed a lot during the budget cycle. And this is the position that would work in the assessor's office, the tax collectors, and the town clerks as the primary, with as needed work in the finance department, as long as it's not related to the Board of Ed work, which we were told it would just be finance specific. So those were my things. And again, we brought it here because we're skipping Personnel 7, bumping it to this meeting. Did anybody have any questions on the thing? I did have one question, which was Steve's question on the last thing, is why is there a current motor vehicles license required? And especially if we have accommodations for, anybody that needs any disability accommodations. And this specifically says they need a driver's license.
That's just something that, if not most, all.
Yeah, it's just routine.
I think it's consistent as well, and I think there's lots of good reasons to require somebody to maintain a valid license, and there's reasons why people's licenses are taken away. And if maintaining a license is required, it allows you to make sure that your staff are the staff that you want.
However, I'll just reiterate what was discussed in personnel. Say, unfortunately, you made a very bad judgment choice, and it had a penalty of automatic suspension of license. Do you lose your job?
Yes.
Okay, that's.
What if somebody doesn't have a driver's
Well,
license?
not to say it, but isn't it like 6 months you lose your license? So for 6 month penalty, you lose
We
your
have public
annual
service is a
employment?
public trust. We have background checks, and I don't wish that on anybody, but it's the reality of the world.
So what if they don't have a driver's license, but they have a state-issued ID, like a non-driver's ID, because they may be somebody who has a disability, is qualified for the position, but does not drive?
I can't speak intelligently on the, what ADA would require us to modify for a reasonable accommodation.
Because that, like, I know people that do not drive, so do not have a valid driver's license, but have a state-issued non-driver's ID. Would that be?
I think if it's a reasonable accommodation, which is required under the law, we would have to do it, gladly.
Okay.
So are we saying that's an assumed thing, that if somebody doesn't have a current license but meets those requirements, that we would waive that?
Or would the
that like a
non-driver ID
policy?
would be in place of the current driver's license?
Yeah, is that like we don't have any policy though,
So
HR policy, do we?
If I could offer that, maybe we refer this to personnel for further action, considering it's consistent with our other job descriptions and not specific to this one.
I don't think we can advertise it till we approve this, though.
I would approve
right?
this, and then have personnel review this as an overall policy related to all of our job descriptions.
Well, to be honest, during personnel, I'll just share that
We
they
did
felt
share.
this was regular
Yeah,
language.
Steve actually had this as a conversation piece at one of the last positions that we had. So I guess,
I yield my.
is this policy for
Just-
the HR policy though, right, like?
Like I would understand for Parks and Rec or Public Works, depending
Yeah.
on the job. Go ahead.
You
Go ahead.
could always add a preferred or something.
That's what I was gonna say.
We have that, and so part of this GovHR policy is updating all our job descriptions, because they are all various out of dates and all that.
Yeah.
So they will definitely take a look at all of those to make sure the license, but some have no mention, some have preferred, some have must have. So you could always do preferred.
So,
And then that would substitute the real ID, the non-driving, but the ID part.
so that gets to, we're doing this before we have the GovHR thing, which we know that the position description, but if some of the things in here are gonna change as a result of that, how do we accommodate that?
Nothing substantive in the job
No,
description.
but the preferred, is that,
That's
will that be in line?
It's unrelated to GovHR. GovHR is looking at all classifications. As Stephen, I think, said, or Kevin, it's this board's decision to make whether you want to do it or not. But the opportunity to make the decision to change really shouldn't be done, and I think I made this point in personnel sub, when one item comes before you, because it's a major policy change. So while I agree with what has been said, I don't agree that we would make the change in this context, go ahead and approve it. And then, we'll be back in front of you with a number of things that come out of the GovHR. The other thing I'd say is because it would be a union position, you don't want to, shake that tree, because God forbid some of the other job descriptions require it, but this one, you took it out.
Yeah.
Somebody could say it's a mandatory subject of collective bargaining, because now you're requiring to,
I'm in support of passing this as is with the motor vehicle license. It's not something that I think is appropriate for us to change as well without Eric here.
Right, and I think it's a broader, because you would then make the policy change, direct the town manager to implement that policy change, and you wouldn't do it on an individual case-by-case basis.
Okay, agreed. But the question, I'll read the question in a minute. The question I have is, as Tom alluded, some of these changes will be part of the GovHR's recommendations for positions, correct?
Yes.
So then, will this fall into that? If there's a recommended change, will
Yes.
this fall into that?
Yes.
Okay, that was the question that I had. Okay, moving on then. So look for a motion effective June 10th, 2024, to create the classification of town hall administrative specialist and to move the proposed job description as presented, and to further move to establish an hourly wage range of pay for the position between $29 and $35 an hour.
I'll make that motion.
A second.
Sorry, I forgot where I was. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
It's been a long night, I just gotta tell you, and thank you all for sticking through this whole thing. The next item is the supplemental appropriation. So we know that this came before us in an emergency. It's been before the Board of Finance already. The plan is to use this emergency, kind of that capital reserve fund contingency, to fix the Performing Arts Center. I have a question. Tom's still here, so he waited this long for the question, so I'm gonna ask it. The question that I had was, we're using this reserve contingency fund that I believe the Board of Finance had set up with Amy to make sure that we had a source for kind of emergency funding for these kind of appropriations. I think that's true. And the question of the $50,000 was, do we have anywhere in Parks and Rec where we have $50,000 in savings from another project that we could have used for this instead of pulling it from the contingency fund?
We do not.
Okay, simple answer. Thank you. Okay, that was my big question. Anybody else have any questions on this item?
The $50,000 has been verified that that's a fair market value?
We believe at most it's gonna cost us $50,000. We have a local contractor, Rogers Construction, doing the work during the day as we speak here. We expect to be done by the end of the week. He's one of our public works on-call contractors, so it's time and material.
Okay.
Okay. So I'm gonna look for a motion effective June 10, 2024 to approve a supplemental appropriation in the amount of $50,000 for the purpose of repairing the drainage system at the Simsbury Meadows Fields.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay, now, these people from the 350th to 250th have waited a long time. I'm gonna turn this one over to Kevin on the ask, which we did hear in the presentation tonight, but I'm in, Selectman Beal.
Sure, thank you. And I appreciated the opportunity to hear this presentation as part of the 250th meeting, and you heard some very eloquent and strong advocacy for this idea. Up front, I think that this motion requires very little from this board, but it gives us enough time to plan out for the 250th celebration. If we were to do something like paint the road markings on Hot Meadow Street where the parade route is currently, it's likely that we would need to either appropriate some funding or allow for private fundraising to support the cost. And would also likely require some sort of approvals from the state of Connecticut and the Department of Transportation because it's also a state highway. Bristol, Rhode Island, near where I grew up, has the longest continuous running July 4th celebration. There was a little bit of debate with John Fox and I in arm wrestling over who had the longest one, but I guess Bristol, Rhode Island has the longest continuously running July 4th celebration there. And they have those painted red, white, and blue centerline markings. And there's actually some additional signage they have there indicating the correct direction of traffic. Our main street is well lit. I think that there's a pretty apparent patriotic effect that could happen in a one-time event like our 250th birthday. We haven't seen it before, and we won't see it again. It's the only time, and I don't think that this would be a recurring appropriation or project. I also am not prescriptive in my recommendation here about the length of it, whether it would go all the way from the intersection, where Liberty Bank is to First Church, or if it would be only in front of I'm not prescriptive in that, but I do think that if we were going to ask town staff to investigate this further, including contacting the state or understanding what the cost would be, that this board were in support of it and before proceeding further. So that's the reason why I'm bringing it to you today, because it was brought to the 250th committee with that support. I'll make one additional note, and it's included in the submission, and it was referenced in public comment earlier, that there is federal guidance in the Manual of Uniform Traffic Control Devices, and there is a federal law that designates those centerline markings in Bristol, Rhode Island as compliant with Section 3B1, where the yellow lines are indicated. So there's precedent, there's federal law that designates what the double yellow lines will look like, and there's also federal law that designates whether or not the red, white, and blue markings are compliant. So with that, I'd make the recommendation here. I'm open to discussion, and I can make the motion when you're ready.
My big question here is, and I don't want anyone to think that I'm in favor of doing this by looking into it, because I'm really concerned about the cost. And I'm pretty sure Tom Roy's painted a lot of roads, so he probably could come up with a high-level cost estimate quickly.
Great.
So when this says authorize, investigate the administration, and he's still here, approvals, legal requirements, and costs associated with them, I wouldn't want to get into any detail on investigating administrative approvals if the cost was just prohibitive, right? So if it's worded that way, I would like it to somehow say that the first identifier should be the cost. If the cost is prohibitive, do we come back to the board and share the costs before we do any due diligence? Or is it all an easy bucket of an answer from your perspective?
But cost-wise, is this something that the cost would be to the town? Is there fundraising going to be involved, or certain other efforts?
I think that there's interest in doing the fundraising, and I'd be happy to personally support that effort, as well. I think that it's not inappropriate for the town to put up some portion of funding a public road for a project that celebrates the nation's birthday, and this town is even older than the nation. I think there's something to be said about that as well. But I don't think it's inappropriate either, since the 250th committee, and there might be residents who are overwhelmingly in support of this, to put up their own financial support to it too. So I don't think that it has to be an either or.
So I agree with that. I am in support. Thank you for bringing this. I am in support of investigating further. I don't see an issue with that. One thing though, when it comes to the 250th, it'd be good to see what the plan is in its entirety, so that if the town says yes to helping fund this, and then there are other things that are asked of the town, what is the all-in expense that the town is putting in for the celebration is something that I think we need to consider.
That's a great point.
Yep.
So, and I have two questions. One is, what is the proposed, well, yes, I would like to know the proposed length of what the area needs to be painted, but also the time length. Like when are you planning to paint? Understanding you're not going to remove it, it's just going to wear over time. And I know that in here there's 3 different types of paint proposed, and I'm sure there's different cost levels depending on each of those paints, whether it's oil-based, water-based, or thermoplastic. But what is knowing that this is in 2026, what is your time frame? What is the time frame that they're looking to have this painted? You know, the beginning of that year, July of that year, you know, now
I
to
think
last through then?
The committee was interested in it being painted for July 4th in 2026. I think that there can be, based on the discussion, what the available money is and what the solution is for how long the paint would last, I think that that would inform when it gets painted and for how long it would stay there.
It could be Memorial Day to Labor Day, you know.
Right,
kind of.
I don't know, and it could be the year between
Right.
2025 to 2026, that whole
Correct.
year, and then it ends. I'm not prescriptive on that part, but I do hope that we'll get support from the town to help us determine what those pieces are. It's nascent, and I thought that because of all these moving parts and even this discussion here about the questions about what it would take, it was worth getting it in now as opposed to waiting too long before we engage the town on a project like that. I wouldn't want the 250th committee to do it entirely on their own, have a fully baked project that this board wasn't in support of.
And I do want to say, I appreciate you bringing it to the board because it's a town staff ask that we're making a decision on, and we're not just going to ask the town staff, we're going through the channels, and Mark is here to approve it and know that he can allocate resources to do it. That said, I don't know if you wanted to say anything since you're sitting and you're still here.
Are there areas of the road that,
No, just, yeah.
Dinner, what?
What's that?
I had a
Here, I
cupcake,
feel
yeah.
like you're here and
No,
listening to
that's
this, so.
okay. If we're looking at doing it for one season, it would be the cheaper of the paint, so the people they cut the paint. Typically, if you were gonna do something like this, you would probably do what's called eradicate the existing line, you would grind it out with a special grinder, and grind out and remove and replace crosswalks all the time. It's not an unusual thing. The other thing that may happen, because it is only for a season, it may be, we could investigate doing like a spray chalk, which would last for a few months and naturally wear away. If not, what we would be looking at doing is paying for the eradication, putting down new lines, and then eradicating and putting down new lines again. But coming up with that basic cost estimate is not a big lift. And then the other challenge will be, once we find out if the cost is reasonable and something that is worth fundraising for or allocating the budget, would be to begin the conversation with DOT.
Right. That's why I put administrative first.
Yeah, then that could take a while, yes. Are there areas of the road, I'm just trying to think, I don't think so, down Hot Meadow, that you don't have any where you have a double lane to turn or anything like that in that stretch? I don't really, can't think of any.
There's nothing terribly complicated in this area. We don't have the center line rumble strips here, so.
Right. Yeah, and there's no passing low zones and, you know.
I asked the question, can a Tesla read the lines?
And I
you're
was willing
testing
to
it.
investigate that, and we can have a board road trip, as well. I'm going to Bristol in a month's time.
Yeah, my lane keeping aid,
I'll
is that gonna
investigate
work?
that.
Back. So to basically the investigating administrative approvals and things like that, that's easy to document what we would need, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, so we're just basically asking for a high-level cost estimate based on the different variations, and then probably the list of things that you'd have to investigate, right? And then maybe a one-pager. Is this a reasonable ask in the next
You bet.
6 months?
Yep.
Is
And
that?
I'm willing to not support doing it if it doesn't make sense.
Yes, agreed. We're just saying, like, is that a reasonable ask to do this within the next 6 months?
It
What do
sounds
they-
like it probably is. It sounds like several other
Yeah,
communities
well, I
do.
didn't know what your timeline is, the timeline is for the 250 is to have this in there,
2026.
but to
Anything-
have the knowing before they plan other.
How much
Right, 'cause
money,
they have
how
to go
much
to
money do we
DOT.
need? You
Okay,
know,
all right,
to
so,
do raise.
okay, we're gonna go.
So you could get him the information pretty.
Okay, so
Very quickly.
moving effective, June 10th, 2024. Do you want to read this, Kevin?
Sure. I'll move that effective June 10th, 2024, to authorize town staff to investigate the administrative approvals, legal requirements, and costs associated with the painting of red, white, and blue centerline road markings along Hawk Meadow Street as proposed by the 250th Committee as part of the anniversary celebrations in 2026.
Second, or I move.
I'll second.
Any discussion? Any more discussion?
I want to make a friendly amendment. No, I'm just kidding.
I know I annoy you.
Friendly amendment accepted.
Damn! I almost made one too, but all those in favor of moving forward and getting this, say aye.
Aye.
Okay.
Thank you.
Boom.
Thanks, Tom.
Thanks, Tom.
Hey, Tom, are you going to get the chalk quote too? I know it's a little late, but.
Okay, what's next?
Yeah, I
Okay,
know.
oh, the minutes.
I'll move to approve the minutes of May 13th.
Any discussion?
I do have some.
I'll second, so we can discuss.
So
Oh, yeah,
in-
sorry.
All right, we're okay, we're moved
We're
in
in
second.
discussion.
So in section D, I'd like to amend the third paragraph and say the motion to approve the proclamation in honor of Pride Month as amended passed unanimously.
Okay, so I have another piece to this that I see is missing. There was two motions here, and it doesn't really call out the second motion.
Mhm.
It doesn't say who moved and seconded the raising of the pride flag, because somebody did that.
I don't know who it was.
I don't either, but I'm saying that's missing. Yeah, so to your point, we modified the proclamation to take that out and add the wording and approved it.
Yeah.
And we all approved.
Right.
And then there was a
And then I,
separate motion.
right, and I moved that, but I don't
Okay.
know who seconded it.
Yeah, and then, so I just want, it doesn't show any of that, who moved and seconded the second motion.
Who seconded the second one, do we remember?
No,
Okay,
we don't know. Somebody's gonna have to sit through hours of.
so we really can't vote on this then tonight.
was
if
like,
we don't
yay,
have
me.
those details.
Okay, well, could we say approve them based on getting the updates from the recording for whoever seconded them?
No.
We have to-
Okay.
We have to have.
All
Sorry.
right, I think I learned that before.
Yeah,
So we'll
we-
just,
because
we'll
it-
just
'cause it's
table
minutes.
approval of the minutes. How's that?
Yep.
Boom, they're
Which-
tabled.
Well, you need a motion.
Oh, I'll make
Motion
a
to-
motion
to
to
table.
table the approval of the minutes.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
I think we table something,
Yeah, then we have to bring it back the next meeting. Yeah, we'll bring it back the next meeting.
So I'd ask when we make these final changes, if staff could update the packets out there as well, just to, so that residents who read the packet know that it was unanimous and supportive. Right, that's all.
We will.
Thank you.
And we did discuss having the minutes, just give me some more work to review before the meeting so I could.
So now we'll blame you if it's held up.
It's really, we need to get it to Wendy earlier, so we're
I didn't see it
working.
till you saw it.
We're working on a few, timing to
Tweaks.
get things done.
Great.
Okay. That's done. The communication, I did have a couple questions on it, but nobody's here, so I'll just ask them on the side. I'll ask you another time. Now, we have to make a motion to move to executive session.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
We're in executive session.